Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice podcast, your inside connection to outdoor legislation. From the Beltway to policy happening your way, we're covering it all. I'm your host, Fred Bird. Join us as we explore public land access, wildlife and fisheries management, Second Amendment rights, the triumphs that shape our nation, the sports we all love, and the stories that fuel our passion for the great outdoors. This is the Sportsman's Voice podcast. All right, friends, welcome back to this special Friday edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. This is the day 2 part of our NASC Summit 2024 coverage of the podcast sessions. On this episode, we kick it off with our friends at Fur Takers of America, National Trappers Association. Marie Newmiller joins us for a trapping policy and trapping update session. Next, we're bringing to you a Louisiana state highlight, and we invite in the secretary of the agency there, Secretary Sheehan, and Mark Lance, my colleague, joins us as well. Then our partners at NWTF, Matt Lindler, Tom Speasy, join us to talk policy, state of the organization, what's going on with turkeys. Then we invite in our president and vice president of our NASC Executive Council, Representatives Jeff Goley, Bill Ream, state of New Hampshire, state of New Mexico, respectively. Both of those gentlemen are retiring, so we get their parting thoughts. We get their thoughts for the future, uh, what NASC means to them, and why it's important for legislators to attend, why it's important for legislators to become a part of their legislative sportsman's caucus in their home states. We'll get to that. We jump to forestry policy session with our new director of forest policy, John Colclaser, joined by NWTF's Doug Little. They have a new, they being NWTF, have a new initiative in the Northeast as it concerns forestry. So tune in for that one. And then finally, we round out day 2 and our NASC coverage with ballot box biology, featuring one Dan Gates, who you've heard on this program before, and of um, internet fame on Prop 127. Colin Schmitz, former legislator in New York, and our vice president of policy, Brent Miller. So that's a lot to cover. Again, these are about 25 to 30-minute sessions. So that's the order of the content. That's the order of the interview. So if you want to jump around, the one you want to get to first, you can do that. Again, I encourage you to listen to all these. It's all great content. And again, this is stuff that was presented on most of this at NASC. So if you've not been, again, this is the kind of stuff you're missing. So let's get to all of that on day 2 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Let's go. All right, folks, our NASC sessions continue. At this time, I welcome in our friends from the Fur Takers of America, National Trappers Association. You've heard both of them on the program before. Jason Wisniewski from FTA, John Daniel from NTA, and Marie Newmiller joins us again here in the NASC studio. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. We're happy to join you.
For sure. So I wanted to take advantage of having both organizations in the same place at the same time and have you both in. This past summer, both organizations held their rendezvous. Both Marie and I were in attendance. I went to FTA, Marie went to NTA, and just want to take an opportunity to highlight both organizations, highlight the rondies, and kind of give that some coverage. We do a pretty good job of talking about our deficiencies as it concerns the trapping community, what we can do better. We talk about that here, and we've done so on this program. But um, to deviate from that, not beating some same drums, I want to give you guys the opportunity and encourage membership, encourage organization at the local level, especially as we go into these next sessions, as we handle issues at the state level as it concerns trapping, because there's no doubt we're in for annual fights, right? So, let's start with John. How was your event over the summer, and what's the state of the organization?
We had a really good event out there in South Dakota. First time we've been that far west. There were a little bit of concern about going that far west out from the general population of trappers across the nation, but it was well attended. The South Dakota Trappers Association did an excellent job on their end getting things organized and promoting it out there. Did well. We're sitting solid in the NTA. We've actually seen an uptick in membership in the recent couple of months and real optimistic about the future.
Awesome. Jason?
Yeah, so we held our rendezvous in Harrisonburg, Virginia back in June, hosted by the Virginia Trappers Association. They did a great job. We'd actually had it there back in 2019 and ended up being a very successful event. So we're really looking forward to being back in Harrisonburg. And I think the NTA is in Harrisonburg
I mean,
so
fine.
years. So
Kind of.
that's just a great opportunity, great location. I think there's a lot of people. It's a central location to where a lot of trappers, you can reach out to Pennsylvania, you get most of the South in there, a lot of the Midwest. It's a convenient location. So we had a great turnout though. I was glad you could come out and speak. I think we also had a great opportunity for one of our um, uh, I guess it was a demonstration that instead of a demonstration, is more of a seminar that Fred was gracious enough to come and sit in on. So it made our lives a lot easier. And it's amazing how fast an hour can go by talking.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's a lot to cover. Yeah, I will say it was a great event. That campus there, that fairgrounds had a lot of space and the opportunity for people to get out there, see it, touch it, experience it, really important. And it's for this audience, especially the legislators listening. If you're within driving distance, I mean, get there. There's no reason not to go check this stuff out. Um, I just enjoyed interacting with the folks, being able to talk policy, talk shop, and you're right, that hour went by pretty dang quick. But there were great questions. People had a genuine interest in what's going on, and being able to highlight emerging trends and get ahead of it. And that you and I, quite a bit of that theme was, being proactive instead of always being on our heels. Like, let's put our heads together and advance some proactive legislation to protect traffic. Marie, you went out to NTA. How was that? And speak to so for the audience, Marie and I, as far as the trapping and fur bearing portfolio, Marie in the West, she handles a lot of the predator management side. I think I might be the only licensed trapper at present on the staff, but I work with Jason at FTA and working on the best management practices and trapping on the ground. So talk about how you guys are working together, NTA and Marie, with out there in the West for CSF and your experience.
Absolutely. And I think first and foremost, I want to highlight how incredible the trapping community is. While I'm not new to predator management and trapping policy, I am not a licensed trapper currently, and I found myself among one of the most welcoming and enthusiastic communities I've come across in my policy work. To the fact that I have several people that have offered to help me get through my trapper's education, which I'll be taking this year.
Awesome.
On the In the western states, we are facing a lot of pushback on predator management and trapping. So we've been working very closely with John Daniel, for example, in Washington state right now, where a lot of that pressure is coming. We've been working on building that community, supporting the community, and encouraging them to really share their story because a lot of those policies do come from a misunderstanding of what trapping is and how important trapping is to conservation overall.
John, how's the relationship and working with Marie and that coalition building worked out? I mean, obviously, for what it was for Prop 127, that was a good example of the entire community coming together for that predator management. But besides 127, that's gotten a
Well,
lot in sorts of press.
for the last about 6 years now, the West has kind of been the hot spot for anti-activity. We had a really good working relationship with Ellery Tucker Williams, and we've continued that on now. And been really a good time working with Marie on these issues. She's been very helpful. Anything I've asked for information wise, she's been very on top of it. She helped facilitate a really good meeting with the Washington Trappers Association just a few weeks ago. Um, I feel like a lot of good things are going to come out of that. We're going to try to be preemptive there on some upcoming issues there. We possibly have a chance to help change some wording in a bill that was defeated last year, and it's coming back this year. And maybe the trappers and the sportsmen can actually help that be a beneficial bill versus a negative bill for the trapping community.
Mhm. For FTA's part, talk about the same thing. I mean, not specifically just you and I, but what we've been able to do with the two organizations coming together.
Oh, yeah, it's an absolute, you know, trapping. A lot of people are unaware of trapping. We've learned that through surveys. The vast majority of the American public don't know it exists or still exists. We went from a million trappers in the early 1980s to right around 176,000 in the U.S. right now. So we've lost 80% of our constituents over the last 50 years. That makes us some very low hanging fruit.
Mhm.
And, we can all try to do our own little parts here and there. But frankly, we just don't have enough people that want to take up the fight. And, if you have a million people, just probability dictates that you're going to find quite a few people to carry the load as we get down to lower numbers. If we try to go at it alone, it's just not going to work. So certainly the last, I don't know, 6 or so years, I guess John's been in as president of the NTA, Dave Hastings before me as president of the FTA, really started working together. And I think it's because they had the vision that, we could sit here and play in our own little rooms and, fight these things and probably take a lot of licks, or we could just, you know, do what we should be doing and work together. And especially now that, getting with the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, attending these events, it's opened up all sorts of new avenues that I say that might be a little, I don't know, a lot of folks in our trapping realm might get their hackles up over this, but, it's something we should have been doing a long time ago. And a lot of people just, either were unaware or too afraid to take those steps. And I'm glad to see that John and Dave really, weren't afraid to take those steps. They saw what was best for trapping and just conservation in general. It's way bigger than trap.
It's great to see the two organizations work together on this stuff, recognizing that. I think people from the outside might look at it as, oh, there's two competing organizations. And this leads me to the next thing. I want you to both talk about the structure of the organizations and how they're different and how they do complement each other. At the local level, the membership level, and so John, start with NTA. How the organization is set up.
So, as you know, Fred, uh, we have been very instrumental for the last 15 years, uh, representing the trappers through the various lawsuits across the nation. Um, we are either, well, for the first time ever, we're actually the front runner of the Mexico case. We're sitting patiently waiting on the judge at this point in time for about a year now before we can proceed in that. We're eagerly waiting to proceed in that. Um, but we've been very, very involved throughout, especially in the Western states, through the lawsuits. And in recent years, as Jason said, FTA has joined with us in that. And I couldn't be prouder of the fact that our two groups are partnering in these things. It reinforces the fact that we stand for the same things, we're fighting for the same things, and we're willing to do it to get together for the benefit of the trapping community.
Jason, talk about FTA and how the memberships work and people are involved in the organization.
Sure. So we're a membership organization. We're probably, I don't know, between a third and a quarter the size of the NTA right now. And we're structured with it's a fully voluntary organization. We have one paid staff member. She's our business executive. She handles a lot of the day to day stuff we have to do. I handle a lot of that stuff too, but we have a treasurer. It's voluntary. And of course, we have a 15-member board of directors that kind of drives everything. And, a lot of our, uh, I guess, the objectives and mission is to promote and protect trapping. And we have done a lot of that through education. So, one of our big strengths, or uh, I guess, things we're well known for is the Fur Takers Trappers College, which was established in 1980 and has been going on annually ever since. And, it's a full week, pretty much from daylight to 10:30 at night.
Hmm.
You are drinking from a fire hose when it comes to trapping. It's
Yeah.
geared. It's actually set up to where, you know, anybody that has never set a trap, gets to go from that point to the people that have been there for 50 years.
Yeah.
That's one of our big educational things. Of course, we do a lot of education at rendezvous, supporting other organizations in different states and how they trying to do some of their educational stuff as well.
At the state level, people hear about their, fill in the blank state trappers association. How are they associated with either one of these organizations? I think that's important to clear up some of what could be confusion and how are they, affiliated?
So we have affiliates is the way we are structured. We're structured a little differently than FTA is there, but our state affiliates pay annual dues to be a member, and they actually have a delegate that comes to our national convention, sits on our board. Uh, we've got about 47 board members um, through that. Our executive council runs the day-to-day workings of the NTA when the board is not in session. Um, we try to work closely with our state affiliates. We recently began a new program within the regions where we're going to have a conference call with the regional heads on a every other month basis to an effort to promote and enhance communication amongst the state affiliates with each other, plus so that the NTA will have a better understanding of what's going on within those states.
So NTA has affiliates and more so like I guess a state chapter, and FTA just membership driven.
We actually have affiliates and chapters
Okay. All right.
in several of our states. So we're kind of our real stronghold is Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky are your big three big states where we have the most members. But that's where we tend to have a lot of chapters as well, which are basically chapters under the Fur Takers of America. So it's actually called Fur Takers of America Chapter 17C. I think that's one of those chapters in Indiana. They have a bunch. And then we have affiliates as well. So that's where a lot of our state chapters or state associations really come in. So, like the Georgia Trappers, the Tennessee Fur Harvesters, a lot of the other groups, that's where they're in. And it's really just all members of chapters are members of the FTA, but not all members of affiliates. So that's kind of the major difference between the two.
And truly, the bottom line is you should be involved in both, right? I think that's fair to say. There's the combination of the two organizations working together, and it's pretty much the same population and right of membership. So, and that probably occurs as well. Again, the overriding point here, especially if you are a trapper, you should be involved. You should have membership, but also people outside of that, I always go to NWTF people, the NWTF members, depend on trapping so very much for those turkeys, on the ground, turkey poult recruitment. You guys are gonna be presenting, with Delta, all on meso predators and duck, conservation and working through trapping there with them. So your duck people need this. So I think it's all hands on deck. And as you both alluded to earlier, um, at the state level, legislative challenges, everyone coming together to stand up, and not just leaving it to a very small minority in the sporting community. Take the chance to talk about the lunch that's coming up. Marie's going to head that up. Give us the lowdown, the topics we're going to talk about bringing Delta in, and then I'll let you guys both talk about your parts for it.
Yes, so both organizations will be joined by Delta Waterfowl, and a big focus of that lunch that we are sharing is how trapping can be beneficial to those populations and encourage growth in areas where we've seen reductions. A lot of our nest habitats are being impacted by those mesopredators that you mentioned, like raccoons, and trapping that is pinpointed and focused and localized to those nesting sites can really help support the growth of the populations through large hatches and successful hatches as well. And that's both of these gentlemen, along with Delta Waterfowl, are going to take us through how that works and the process that's involved and what tools they need to have available to them and why legislation can hurt those efforts when it starts limiting the tools that are available to our trappers.
Jason, what part of the presentation are you covering?
So I'll be covering kind of a lot of the threats to trapping right now, trying to show a lot of maps. There's been a lot of states that have restrictions. a lot of states that have had legislation the last few years that really try to aim this stuff. Fortunately, they've all not advanced. Uh, but if you actually look at the number of states that, and this will be something I show in one of my maps, the number of states that have highly restricted trapping, as well as the ones that have had some recent legislation, it's about a little over a third of our country is has some very strict restrictions as you comes to trapping, which is we talked about there being a million trappers in the 1980s. We're down to 176,000, and then we hear about the turkey populations crashing,
Mhm.
ducks, the deer, all these different things, and there's no pressure on these meso predators anymore. No management of them. They're just being allowed to grow uncontrollably, basically, and we're seeing the results of that now. I think across multiple taxa, especially those that we hunt, but we can't forget the non-game taxa
For sure.
are also being affected, some listed species, so
John, what, you're part of the presentation?
So basically, I'll start off by saying Delta has some really good 30 years worth of data that supports trapping and what it can do. And my focus, or the NTA's focus, in our seminar is to let legislators understand that the only way that that can continue is with meaningful trapping. And a lot of the bills that are out there now, while they may not outlaw trapping direct, hamstrings it to the point that it's not effective. It's they're proper tools for the proper things, and if you restrict those tools, your results reflect that.
Jason, you mentioned some of the data collection and that you've presented on the past. I know NTA has done it as well. I think it's vitally important, and it's a step in the right direction. The information sharing and being able to put those graphs and charts and infographics out to the general public, because so much, and we've talked about this in the past as it pertains to trapping, was kept secret to the individual, right? Because that was just how old school trappers were brought up, but also as a community, kind of keeping the trapping community in the back. I don't know why that was. Maybe it's just because of a small population, but it was, and there wasn't information sharing. Now that there is, and these other groups have a vested interest in the management of predators. Again, we talked about Delta, TF, Turkeys for Tomorrow comes to mind. They're really trapping heavy on their mission. Um, it just highlights the need and the importance of collaborative work, and again, the presentation you guys are giving with Delta, I think, highlights that as well. Um, Going forward into the next legislative period, I know there's gonna be challenges, especially, in the Northwest again and the Rocky regions. Marie, do you have any intel on anything coming up that we can talk about?
We do have some areas that are considering banning trapping on public lands.
Mhm.
And a lot of that derives from a desire to protect beavers as watershed developers without understanding the damage that beaver can also do to those habitats or to the agricultural areas. We're also seeing some conflict issues or perceived conflict issues with people who are using outdoor recreation and those shared spaces. And I think going into this legislative session, it's really going to be important that we tell the story and we share a lot of information about those best management practices and the efforts that trappers are making to ensure that conflict is minimized as best as possible or eliminated. But also talking about the tools available to us. A lot of times when trapping restrictions come through, it comes from a misunderstanding of what trapping is and what's needed. It would be like legislation after a windstorm blows through and takes out roofs. But then a law is passing, you need to repair all of these roofs. However, we feel roofing nails are dangerous, so you just get a hammer.
Right.
It's really important that we share the story about why there's the diversity of tools and why it's important to have access to as many of them as possible.
There was an interesting piece of information that was shared by Mark Duda in his presentation. Trapping in the population totality is approved. People approve of it in the majority, and that's 54% of the general population actually approves of trapping. 28% disapprove. Now the change comes, and it's the verbiage. Trapping as a tool, people can wrap their heads around. It's when we put recreational trapping in front of that that they lose their minds and they think, I guess the word just makes people think we're out there having fun. Not like it is enjoyable work, but they confound the two, but they're both the same. So it's interesting from a communication standpoint of how we consider our messaging going forward, and especially working with legislators, some that they have a constituency and they hate us and hate what we do and hate that this is a thing. But I think Mark's point in his presentation, choosing our words is very important going forward, and we can't just dig our heels in for the last 60 plus years, and this is how it's been and this is how it's always gonna be. No, it's not, and it can't be. Thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. And, there's a big part of that. I've thought about this a lot through the years, and wording is super important. And that's all been tested. A lot of that actually was done in the Chicago area where, I mean, it's not a probably more potentially hostile area to trapping than in that area. And they had tested these keywords and they found what worked and what didn't. And uh, and it is very important that we use those correct terms, but it's also very important that we just talk about it. For years and years, the strategy was, well, if we lay low, nobody's going to bother us. We learned that that strategy isn't working. In fact, our strategy was helping the anti-trapping movement because we let them control the narrative. Now everything that's known about trapping is known from what they have told the public about trapping. And we even saw it in one of our sessions yesterday, talking to somebody that, there was, I think, some misconceptions about things. And, and it's real. So the big thing is we need to talk about it, but we need to make sure we keep in mind these key words because it's going to be the difference, I think, in the miscommunications. And also, there's the key words that we can use that help our case. But there's the key words that the people that are opposing trapping are gonna
Mhm.
make sure they wanna make sure that are used, combat us because they know they trigger the folks on the other end.
Sure. John, your thoughts?
So, I guess to start off with, I'd like to say, a lot of people enjoy their job and what they do. That doesn't invalidate the value of that job because they have fun doing
That's
the
right.
job. So, I think it's important that people do understand that, and wording is an important thing. Uh, the fact that trapping is so much more than a heritage, so much more than, a way for somebody to put money in their pocket. We live in a world that we created, a world that has altered everything that was natural when
Mhm.
it gets right down to it. And needing tools to manage those things is so important. And having the right terms that every form, even deer hunting, while people like the deer hunting, it is a management tool. It's a part of wildlife. The North American model is the most successful model in the world for it, and the fact that we can do it in a lot of ways free by people who enjoy using the tools there for management, that's just a tribute to the resourcefulness of our country.
Closing remarks here, and I'll give everyone a chance around the table to go. I'll take my umbrage here as the host. Two things stick out in my head that we've talked about, all three of us have in the past. And one point being, the environmentalist movement over the last 20, 30 years is very predominant in our culture, especially here in America right now. Elections have consequences. We just had one, so we'll see with the new administration and those appointments once they get approved bear out. But there's still a huge contingency of, I don't know, air finger quote greenies, right? And it's ironic to me that those people are the same people that would scream against trapping, regulated trapping, when it's one of the most green things we can do, that renewable resource, not creating faux fur out of petroleum products and all the energy that goes into that, where this stuff already exists. It's renewable. It lasts a hell of a lot longer. Um, so there's that point I'll leave with the audience. And the second one is, Jason, you brought this up last year, and it's gonna support what I said earlier about all hands on deck. There was a local fur ban that was coming up somewhere. It might have been Rhode Island. There's a bunch of them last year. We defeated them, but there was a segment of the sporting community that I never considered, and you pointed it out to me, and that was anglers. And that fur is utilized in angling equipment and the lures and bait. And I never thought about it. And then all of a sudden, your fly fishermen and all those folks were like, we're not going to have these things because if this fur ban goes into effect, it affects us. So it's not just the deer hunters that we're looking at, the turkey people. We're looking across literally the water to our angler friends. Get involved because you never might have thought about it, but it definitely affects you.
So one of the ways that the Denver Fur Bill was defeated, it was kind of that same coalition,
Mm-hmm.
and that was one of them. The one we specifically talked about earlier was Washington State,
Yeah.
and that was where I started thinking about it. What products that we use daily have fur in them? And one I was thinking about was like I like to fly fish. A lot of my flies have possum dubbing in them,
Mm.
using elk hair, deer hair, all that stuff. Well, technically, under that bill, I saw that as being something that would be illegal, and that I could see somebody potentially going to one of these states and buying that also wanted to buy a fur jacket that was banned and saying, "Hey, I can buy this half fur. Why are you discriminating against one group but not the other?" And so I ended up, and it was actually through the NASC summit. I met some folks from the American Sportfish Association, and got to talking to them, and I said, "Are y'all monitoring any of these fur bills?" And they weren't even aware of them. And they started looking, and then they realized, "Oh, yeah, this does affect us or could affect us." And, the hat that John has on, Western hats, a lot of the Jewish community, they like quality felt hats.
Mm.
You don't get quality felt hats out of synthetic material. You have to have good fur. The reason that the Jewish community is real interested in it is because they can pass them from generation to generation,
Mhm.
and, you just don't get that with faux fur.
That's right.
It is disposable.
Yeah.
It's made in Unfortunately, it's probably made in sweatshop labor
Yep.
overseas, so we're sporting, inhospitable, human rights conditions and, just, polluting the environment to try to save some animals, which are already overpopulated for the most part, so why not use those resources and be better for the environment? It's just, kind of a no-brainer, but
Yep. To us. John, closing thoughts?
So I think it's kind of ironic with all the talk of carbon footprints and global warming and things like that, that people who are concerned about that won't embrace one of the least carbon footprint
Mm.
uh, natural resources we have, a good responsible use for surplus, uh, which has to be managed. We have to manage populations. We've already established that we cause the issues in a lot of those areas for habitat reduction, and how responsibly using those natural products like fur uh, to reduce carbon footprints from other sources. I don't understand why they can't embrace that and recognize that as a viable option.
Yeah, and well, the communication part is on us, and that's where I end with Marie, talking with our legislators and our sportsmen's caucuses.
Yes. I think in the past, trapping has been viewed as that low hanging fruit or that area of conversation that could be politically dangerous to enter. But in reality, trapping helps us bridge the gap between adjacent communities. It helps us connect with the agricultural and the ranching community, but also with those who are concerned about climate change and protecting the environment. There's a lot of concerns right now around fast fashion, as well as petroleum based clothing materials. And trapping provides that great bridge for the hunting and fishing, trapping, and sporting community to connect with those people who are looking at protecting climate change. And I'm going to sound like a broken record. I think I've said it twice on our podcast already.
Mm.
The only way to get there is by sharing our story,
Mhm.
start to finish. We just can't show only the pictures at the end of the hunt.
That's right.
Take people all the way through from that sunrise in the beginning to the sunset at the end of your hunt.
Well said, folks. Thank you guys for coming in. Enjoy the rest of your summit, and go get a membership, NTA, FTA, and support trappers locally and nationally. Folks, we'll see you around. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
This year, we wanted to do a more of a state host state spotlight here. So, have the opportunity to have Secretary Sheehan in and our own Mark Lance to talk about all things Sportsman's Paradise in Louisiana. touch on some of the victories that Mark and in-state partners were able to secure. But welcome, Secretary. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sportsman's Paradise. Some of us are going to go out next couple days and experience that. Well, maybe not all that Louisiana has to offer, but we're going to get some of it, a flavor for it. Um, Tell the audience that may not know or never been to Louisiana, why is it the Sportsman's Paradise, and why should people come down here to enjoy the outdoors?
Yeah, we're really excited to be the host of this year's conference and being able to be the Sportsman's Paradise. There's really no place better for the Sportsman's Caucus to come and really see what we have to offer. So at the department, manage about 1.7 million acres of land. We've got some of the best habitat management in the country. We've got some of the best game wardens in the country, biologists, and you name it. And they manage and take a lot of pride in the resources we have here in Louisiana. And so we're really proud about the fact that we get to be the sportsman's paradise. Some of the best duck hunting you can find, fishing, and so anytime we get to share that and talk about it, it's really the best part of my job that we get to come out and do this and share it with other folks. And so sportsman's paradise is we've got some great red snapper down on the coast. I don't know if anybody's going to get the chance to go out and fish this week, but we've obviously got some fantastic fishing as well as some great hunting. And so just opened our deer seasons throughout the state. We manage off of a deer map program. And so different parts of the state open at different times. And so we're kind of all full go on our deer program. We've also just opened duck season in our split in the state. And so we're kind of in the busiest part of the year. Thanksgiving is our busiest week. So we're heading into that right now. So it's really a great time of year to be here.
Yeah, sounds it. And more recently, we reported on a victory at the state level in introducing black bear to the state of Louisiana for the first time in Mark, how many years?
Since the late 1980s.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. Just Mark, talk about that, how that all came together, and the ability to celebrate that victory.
Yeah, and I'll really turn it over to the secretary to talk about it as well because it's one of the best conservation success stories, not only in Louisiana but really in the country.
Sure.
Black bears were placed on the Endangered Species Act list after they were almost hunted to extinction. They're right there after the 1980s. The department, along with a lot of private landowners and so many other stakeholders came together and said, "Hey, there's a problem that needs to be fixed here. What can we do to work together, to bring this species back?" And over the course of the past, 40 years now, it's good to see that, Louisiana finally has a sustainable population to offer a very limited, black bear season.
Where is Secretary that those wildlife management areas that people could, I guess, a lottery draw for?
Yeah, so if you're specifically talking about the bear season, so we have a bear map as well, and we use that to kind of base our bear management. So back in the 80s, we reintroduced bears into 3 or 4 different areas throughout the state and really highlighted, the importance of having landowner partnerships, a lot of our private public partnerships, because, and we've said this, all week on stage, of the fact that we are only as strong as our partners, and the partnerships that we can create as a department to maximize conservation is how we're going to make the most impact. And so our landowners are really a key part of that, this public private partnership that we have throughout the state. And we introduce bears into 3 or 4 different areas throughout the state, and that's where our highest populations are. And we currently view that we manage about 2,300 bears throughout the state. We see them in all parishes in Louisiana. If you're one in those more concentrated areas, you think there's bears everywhere. If you're in one of those other parishes, you think there are no bears. And so we're kind of always battling the public intent of what they want and what they want to hunt. And we felt that we were at the point in which we could get to a bear season, and specifically in our bear area 4, which is where the hunting season is going to take place here in a few weeks on December 7th, is that bear area was our highest population. That was the first introduction back into the state, and those landowners were really kind of hitting the max because as hunters, we kind of and really as a legislator or a secretary, what we see most is that the public can only tolerate so many of these species to be out there, but also the demand of the hunter and the public. And so we're trying to kind of always balance that we're not going to make everybody happy, but what we can do is make good decisions. And so we're kind of all the time kind of balance that need and that ask. And so what we found is that Bear Area 4 was our best population to be able to sustain the season. We did 10 lottery tags based on land ownership as well as public ask. And so half of those tags went to landowners. And so we set a requirement that if you were somebody who essentially helped us kick this program off and you owned so many acres of land, you could put your name into the lottery because that is who is the strongest partner in this effort. And we wanted to make sure that we could thank them in some way through this random lottery process. And so if you own so much land, you're dealing with these bears more than anybody else. That we wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to manage these bears on your property. And with the population only being able to sustain what we believe to be 10 females being killed, we're asking that bears get killed, but obviously there can always be that difference of sometimes females end up getting killed.
And Secretary, you and I were talking about it the other day too, but y'all had several thousand applicants to secure those 10 tags, and a lot, all of that money goes back into fair habitat management and the sustainability of the species.
What's the cost of the lottery entry?
So the way that we set it up is we required a lottery entry and then a bear tag as well. And so we wanted to make sure that we kind of balanced again the cost of conservation, which sometimes is a much bigger cost, to also make sure everybody had the opportunity to hunt and fish. So if you're a lifetime license holder in Louisiana, it was a little bit cheaper than if you are not a lifetime license holder. And so for the cost for the average person was about $75
Wow.
to be able to get into this. And if you look at states like Minnesota or Maine or some of these other states that have large animal, large carnivore hunts, this is really our first large mammal hunt that we have in the state of Louisiana. That number is relatively low compared to what most states get. But what we wanted to do is make sure we provided the opportunity for as many people as possible to get in that. So with the landowner tags, we also had our wildlife management tags as well as public tags. And so we ended up having, 10 tags total go out. And of that, we had a couple thousand applicants from all over the state. And it was just in state folks that could apply for it because they're really the ones that have done all of the work to get the species where it is. So we didn't want to invite outside folks to come in. We want to get to that point, but we're just not there yet in that first season.
To be clear, the $75, was that just for everybody? Or if you got drawn, it was the entry fee for the lottery plus your tag?
So that's everything. So now those landowners are set and good to go, or those tag holders are set and good to go. It's just a one-time payment. What we didn't want to do is have to go back and ask for more money for somebody else who needs a tag. We also conducted a class, which obviously comes at a cost of making sure that folks know exactly what they're interacting with and what they're hunting, and kind of balancing that as well.
I guess what I'm driving at is to Mark's point that you guys obviously were able to raise dollars to go back into that management program. So even if you didn't get drawn, you can take solace in knowing that the funds you put in to be part of that lottery are going to a great place. So, and we talked about people being conservationists, and so many people say, "Well, I buy my hunt and fishing license. I'm a conservationist." Well, you're participating, but you need to have more skin in the game, and this is one way to do that, to actually contribute directly to a management program for something that's, a great success story like you were saying. I don't wanna make the whole thing bear-centric here, but I got a couple more questions on the bear because it's fairly new, I guess, to a couple generations. What was the education? There's gotta be an education on it, because if you're trying to get boars taken off the land and not those sows, obviously, there's nuance to that, and if you're not familiar with that, is I think quite frankly, because 'cause I'm in the Northeast and I hunt Maine, they're probably the hardest animal to judge on the ground, and it's not super easy to tell. I mean, unless a sow's got cubs, it's kinda hard to tell. So how are you guys, trying to achieve those goals, and what are you telling your bear hunters?
So what we did is we required that everybody who got drawn for the tag, so essentially all 10 people had to go through this class. We partnered with Safari Club International SCI to be able to make sure that they were obviously an integral role in this whole thing. And we wanted to make sure that they kind of had a seat at the table still. And they obviously have a lot of knowledge in these things. And so we wanted to make sure, again, those public private partnerships are where our strength is. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to educate everybody from we've had battles with CWD here, and it's in those areas. So whether you could bait or not, and we wanted to make sure those hunters were educated on what they could use and what they couldn't use. We also wanted to make sure that there's a firearm safety component in that mix of things, as well as kind of just a basic hunter safety. And so we wanted to make sure that everybody knew exactly what they were getting themselves into, but then also kind of having those conversations of how you're going to identify animals once you're out in the field. And we obviously have a big pig problem in Louisiana. So there's, you know, this entire big factor of, what you're really gonna interact with when you're out in the field if is this somebody who necessarily isn't a big hunter or a big game hunter. And so we kinda started that education of, you're gonna see a lot of bears. We wanna make sure that you're shooting some of the bigger bears that we have here on the properties, and we wanna make sure that, you don't shoot a bear with cubs, and you wanna make sure some of those things and what to look for, and some of the facial features are a little bit different. The sizes obviously are different. Our male bears here in Louisiana, some of them are huge. We went out to the field a few weeks ago and did a collaring effort. We still collar a lot of bears here. We still den a lot of bears here, and really try to track that population. And we had a 600-pound male black bear in the trap when we got there.
It's a big bear.
Yeah, it's a very big bear, and the intent was there was a female in that area about 300 pounds. The intent was to go collar her and then measure and take care of her cubs, but that wasn't necessarily what we got ourselves into, right? And so we're trying to practice that educational component to make sure that everybody knows kind of the difference in these bears. And we definitely don't want anybody killing a bear with cubs, but we also recognize the fact that this is a new process and obviously mistakes are going to be made, but we want to make sure that everybody has a enjoyable experience as well.
So are all methods this will be my last bear question. Are all methods, available, dogs, baiting, or is there still hunting in certain areas and baiting in certain areas?
So no dogs,
No dog?
and we're allowing baiting in certain areas. So in our CWD protocol areas, there won't be any baiting,
Okay.
but in the other areas, there will be. I shouldn't say there won't be any baiting. You can use glazed donuts,
Mhm.
if you're going to stop at Krispy Kreme on the way. But other than that, we don't want corn or anything like that that could then go into the deer population and, manage that. And so we have kind of put all that educational component out as well. Uh, we only have select dog hunting in the state of Louisiana in the first place, so we didn't want to bring that into the fair. The idea is that it's a stationary hunt for whoever does it. Partly a safety component, partly again that identifying component, right? We're dealing with. We want male bear shot over the females, just because that's how we're going to sustain our population.
I think both methods, in my experience, allow for that selective process and practicing that good management. If you treat a bear, you can look up and first of all, if it's got cubs, you're gonna see those cubs and, "Oh, that's cool." You gotta kinda inconvenience the bear, walk away. But if you got a good quality boar and that's what you're looking to take up, there you go. Same thing with the barrel and then the bait side, you can use that as a point of reference. Okay, is this a sizable bear? Is this a mature bear? Which exactly you were talking about. Well, that's great. It's good to have those opportunities. Go ahead, Mark.
Before we move up the black bear conversation, too, I would like to commend the department and the commission on y'all's thought process and how you've handled this. This is a perfect example of the North American model of wildlife conservation in action and using science-based data to make informed decisions.
You're absolutely correct, and I appreciate the praise because, Louisiana and the Endangered Species Act is not, a new partnership either, right? So we've gone through reintroducing, obviously, the black bear. The American alligator is the epitome of a success story of getting something off of the endangered list and then moving towards a hunting season. And, we also have reintroduced bald eagles into the state of Louisiana. We've introduced turkey. We've reintroduced quail. We've reintroduced deer to some extent in certain parts of Louisiana. And the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries is the one of the only, and if not probably the only department in the country that has managed to get something not once but twice and three times off of the endangered species list. It's almost unheard of. And so all of our funds go to efforts that, whether it's an exploratory exhibit with our whooping crane projects right now, or reintroductions of some of these other crane species that we're working on, and being able to maximize our effort. Like, we are the example of what conservation is, and we're very proud of that. And every day our goal is to truly serve the sportsman's paradise. And we make a conscious effort as somebody who hunts and fishes. I want to make sure that we have as many opportunities to do that in the state. So we're always battling and trying to make sure that what our management practices are, they match an active management of species to hunt it. We're not trying to take away hunting seasons. reduce limits or anything like that. We want to maximize it every opportunity we get.
Absolutely. Louisiana boasts some great fisheries, inshore, offshore. We had Chris Horton and CCA in here recently talking rigs to reefs. That program there that CSF champions and acknowledging the ecosystems that these old uh, oil rigs, golly days, it was escaping me. Oil rigs present and what was never there and is now there, and there's a whole industry, ecotourism set up around that and contributes to the quality of the fisheries. Talk about that. What people can coming to Louisiana can come to expect. You mentioned red snapper, and to Louisiana's credit, and Chris and I have talked about this in the past. The way the Gulf states and Louisiana specifically are able to survey and have a better idea of how many fish and the population of fish you have to set your seasons. It's a far better model and wish the people up and down the East Coast could implement the same thing and not just relying on the feds. See Florida one day, red snapper season, right? You guys are doing it right.
Mhm. Yeah, so we have a program called LA Creole, which is really the national standard of how you should management fish. And we're very proud of that program. And a lot of states have been working to adopt it and use that model because what we did, and I'm a strong believer that, as a Republican, as a conservative, I always tell people that, the other side doesn't necessarily have a monopoly on how we talk about conservation. That us as the state is much better of a manager of our resources than anybody in Washington, D.C. will ever be.
Indeed.
That we know exactly what's happening, how it's happening, and that we should essentially have most of the management practices in our state. And I know that there are times when the Fed stepping in is helpful, but I would say more times than not, it's not. And so as a department, we don't wanna be managed or have restraints that the feds put on us, and so what we did a few years ago is we said we have this LA Creole program. The current standard that NOAA uses is not good enough for the state of Louisiana. We have a new process. We can actively measure at the dock, using data coming in from our fishermen of what they're pulling in, from our guides, from our charters, and what they're pulling in. We can actively manage the pound per week. And so we went to Gulf States and said, we're going to start managing these species on our own. And we just want the feds to give us an allocation. We'll allow them to tell us how many pounds they want us to catch during our season, but we're going to actively manage our season. And what LA Creole allows us to do is to manage week by week of where that species is at
Mm.
and allow us to track poundage. And this year, we actually had the longest snapper season we've ever had because of LA Creole. And so, what we did, which is at times not as popular, but in the long run, it really pays off. Of we're able to open and close the season as needed. So we were able to, again, looking at the demand of what the fisherman is asking us, right? We're looking at science, we're looking at what the fishermen are asking us. And what we were able to do is on our high populated fishing weekends, we were able to open it up the week before the weekend and then the week after. But on those low propensity times, we were able to close it to then prolong our opportunity to hunt or to fish through Labor Day, to fish through Memorial Day, to fish through all of these dates that historically had been closed and have the season open during the week while kids are out of school. But then once we go back into school, we shift back to the weekend to prolong it. So then you have the opportunity to hunt and fish with your family. And that's really what we're trying to do. And LA Creole now has been adopted by Puerto Rico, by most of the coastal states, and it allows us to really maximize again those partnerships that we have.
It's a great policy. Mark, since we have you in here, I know we're spotlighting Louisiana, but I do want to take the opportunity to talk about the relationship between CSF and the state agency and how that's bear has borne out fruit for all involved and to the benefit of the residents of Louisiana.
Yeah, 100%. We obviously have a great relationship with the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. We've partnered with them closely on the black bear, like we just got done talking about. And we also were able to assist with passing House Bill 795 this past legislative session with the Louisiana Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, led by Representative Jerome Zarang, to protect state agency funding so they can continue or protect state agency funding from the issuance of free and discounted licenses that the legislature would have passed so that we can continue this partnership, continue highlighting the North American model, and keep doing great work.
Mhm. Well, I think we have a fantastic relationship because what most people don't realize is that when we get model legislations from folks like you guys, we're able to then use that. And not always the cookie cutter doesn't work in Louisiana. It doesn't always work. We're okay with it. You're okay with it. We want to then adjust it and use that model in Louisiana because a lot of times everybody tries to reinvent the wheel to get a big win, but we don't need to. I've had the opportunity to work for Governor Nome in South Dakota, for President Trump, and everybody wants a big political win, but some people have done better legislation than we have. Governor Nome has put through some of the best wildlife conservation legislation that we've then taken and put in Louisiana now because the model is there. And Jeff Landry passes things that, Kristi Noem is now doing in South Dakota. And that's the value of where these things come from. And then if you add another layer on top of that with folks like CSF, you guys are the ones who are able to go to every state. And then once every state starts passing it, well, now we have an across the board match that's not regulated at the federal level, it's regulated at the state level. So those nuances that apply to Louisiana that don't apply to Alabama or don't apply to South Dakota or Ohio, we're now able to adjust them enough so they work for Louisiana instead of having something that passes at the federal level that doesn't work for every state. But now you have to, work inside those constraints when you guys step in and help us pass those. Not only are we allowed to at that point reach across the aisle and get some folks on the other side. I mean, I think that bill was also supported by Jay Luno, who is a fantastic ally of this agency. And it doesn't matter that he has a D next to his name. Him and Zarang work together often. And I'm sure often they don't, right? But we want to make sure that we're able to maximize these efforts as often as possible. And you guys coming in allow us to do that on more times than one, not only with helping these legislators, but also when we need kind of lobbying help or funding help, that's exactly where you guys come in a way that we can't do it on our own.
And to your point that you just made there, with those two gentlemen being able to work together. I mean, that's the spirit of CSF, and that's really conservation. These are nonpartisan issues. I don't care, what letter is in front of your name. We all like a good, clean, natural space. We want to see robust populations of fish, of wild species that are game species and non-game species alike. And yeah, that right there illustrates exactly who we are in our partnerships on in state. So obviously, thanks for pointing that out. My last question, I'll let you both have parting thoughts, but as a self-proclaimed turkey junkie, and this audience well knows that, talk to me about the Louisiana wild turkey, your population, and how can we get Mark to help you get a fall season?
So we're obviously working on our turkey population every day. So there's parts of Louisiana that sustain very well for a turkey population, and then parts that don't. And that's where a lot of our management practices come in. You'll see in our northern WMAs, wildlife management areas, it's obviously very popular. We have good, dense populations there. The habitat is right for those species. But then on our coastal areas, you're not going to see it as much. Right around the same time we started working on the black bear, a few years earlier, we actually started the process of reintroducing turkeys into Louisiana because there was just so few. And so we've really turned into more of an active management of those species to look at more controlled burns because obviously that helps the turkey population and some of these other management practices that we can work on absorbing in the state to really be able to maximize those efforts. I do think that our turkey population is lower right now than we'd obviously like it to be. We wanna continue to grow it, but we don't necessarily have the habitat that states like Arkansas have or, grew up in Ohio. There's fantastic turkey hunting in Ohio and Kentucky, but it's the same thing I always tell people about the deer population. The nutrients and the habitat to sustain a deer
Right.
population that looks like Kentucky, looks like Ohio, is very different than what you see in Louisiana, and so we're always kinda trying to balance, again, the ask of the hunter of being able to add those seasons instead of just a spring season, but we also, look at the best management practices and see how we can get there sooner rather than later.
I know some of my friends will call me when they hear this and bust on me about the fall season because we all have different philosophies on it depending where the species is challenged, right? A spring hunting is more advantageous than having an either sex opportunity in the fall. But nevertheless, I appreciate you entertaining that from a turkey junkie. Mark, parting thoughts from you?
No, I mean, we're happy to be in Baton Rouge. We're happy to be in the Sportsman's Paradise. As you mentioned, there's no better place to bring this conference, and I mean, it speaks to the fact that what we got over 330 registered attendees at this
I
point.
think it went further north than that, but yeah, it's a great
Yeah,
crowd.
which shatters our record
Mm.
at 275 in Bozeman, Montana, which is a very desirable place to put it as well.
Right.
So, like we've talked about, I mean, we could go on and on about the successes here in Louisiana and what all, the department and everybody else has going on, but, yeah, it's been great.
Secretary?
Well, I just really appreciate you guys having me today and really hosting in the Sportsman's Paradise. I tell people all the time as the department, we have a unique opportunity to work with kids and grandkids and parents and grandparents. And that's the same thing you guys get to do on a daily basis. And so really proud to be able to host everybody and be able to have folks down in Louisiana and look forward to seeing when everybody gets the chance to hunt and kill tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the partnership. Mark, thanks for all your good work and appreciate you guys coming in.
Thank you.
All right, continuing on with our NASC sessions. It's a fun one for me annually to catch up with my friends at the National Wild Turkey Federation. So we're talking a little policy, get an update for the MWTF, but we're just going to talk turkey pretty much. So at this time, welcome in Director of Government Affairs, our friend Matt Lindler, and Tom Speasy, National Director of Conservation Programs. Gentlemen, thanks for making the time. I know I pulled you away from a nice lunch session there. They're talking trapping in there, but appreciate you making the time.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, thanks, Fred. Appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's talk the dry stuff first. Well, it's not dry to us, but let's talk about it, and then we can talk turkey. What a lot of stuff moving and shaking at NWTF, a lot of stuff in the West as far as forest policy goes, but um, coming out of the sessions here, the last half of the year, going into 2025 with a new administration coming in and turnover at the states. What's going on in NWTF? What are you guys focused on for the new year?
You want me to start, Tom? All right. So, gosh, we really need to get a cottonwood fix passed
Hmm.
this coming year. I feel like that with the current layout of the administration with both chambers of Congress, we can get it done. Um, that's been hindering our policy. I mean, our conservation work on the ground on national forests in multiple places in multiple states over the past what almost 10 years. Um, but we're looking forward to working with Congress to get that passed. Um, farm bill, farm bill, farm bill, farm.
Everyone's favorite topic.
Yeah, we would love to have gotten one passed this year. Obviously, it's been a year late, but it looks like it's going to be 2 years before we have one. So as it stands, you know, Senator Stabenow just released her Senate text. The House had text that passed out of committee, had not been taken up on the floor. But since the election during this lame duck, they have decided on the House, in particular, the GOP side of both chambers want an extension
Mhm.
versus working on a full farm bill. They're going to wait until they have both chambers going into 25 before they start working on that. I feel like they can get their priorities passed
Mhm.
a little easier. But as for us, it's just important that those programs that are vital to our conservation work, EQIP, CRP, all of those things get funded for um, at least 5 years.
Mhm.
We'd like to see that happen.
Tom, what's going on with the conservation team?
Fred, we just coming out of all the legislative sessions, of course, in the last calendar year, really, most of the states run their sessions from January through May. Some go longer than that. Some states skip a year, like Texas does every now and then. We last year, just as sort of a summary, we were engaged in over 160 state level policy issues, and um, so, as the conservation director, I also oversee all state policy across the country. But our directors of conservation operations are really our field generals in that regard. Then our district biologists, and of course, our volunteers are very connected in their states at that level. We had 160 policy issues that we engaged in, and really, on the average, about 65-70% of the time, we have a positive outcome, whether we're opposing or supporting or taking a neutral. position, and about 20% of the time we have a negative outcome, and the rest of those are bills that were either killed or still tabled, that sort of thing. And as you might imagine, the type of bill that we spend the most time on are the hunting firearms related kind of bills, not really Second Amendment.
Right.
We don't get into deep dive on Second Amendment bills, but we do a deep dive into those that impact hunting recreation type firearms, which anymore is almost everything. So we spend a lot of time on that. Those make up probably half of the bills, but they take the most amount of time. And then, of course, we get involved in a lot of habitat related bills that are either in the state legislature or it's a decision by wildlife agency policymakers, commissions, boards, et cetera. And we spend a lot of time with our state wildlife agency partners, backing them up. And of course, we always are filter, Fred, and you know this. We try to align. Well, we really make it a point to align with our state chapter
Mhm.
positions and our state wildlife agency partners on state policy. Try to do that most of the time. When we can't, as an organization, we just stay silent for the most part. Seldom do we ever go the other direction. And then we spend a lot of time. Matt and I work really closely together as well. As you know, we NWTF has a very robust conservation delivery arm. A lot of it in forestry work specifically. We this last year we spent a lot of time. Matt was very involved as well on national old growth EIS that is going to be put out there, going to impact all the forest plans across the country for the U.S. Forest Service. That was a big issue for us. The national old growth issue is a big deal to anybody that has any stake at all in our national forest. Spend a lot of time on this.
Find it interesting the percentages you quoted there a little bit ago, and I forgive me, I don't know across the nation for our stats, but the region I manage from the Virginia's north, that was almost exactly lined up with our engagement with bills that they're either were passed or failed, one way or the other, but it was good or for us, and it was a 70-30 split.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, that's good. Really, really happy with that result.
Yeah, it shows that we're often aligned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right.
Well, in our partnership, and as you know, Fred, when our state chapter folks, when our district biologists have a question on policy, they call the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. We're very connected. That we always look to you all for. So, what are you doing on this? Or we watch for how you're leading something to maybe glean something that might give us. So, I think our partnership is really beneficial both ways. Really helps our folks a lot.
100%. And, I can attest to it. Me and Doug Little will have great conversations. Before he left, Matt DeBona would call me, the region district. I know they changed the titles. He was there in New England before he departed, but yeah, no, the collaboration, the relationship is fantastic. Like a great example. Going even back to what you said about weighing in on Second Amendment issues, not so much the 2A stuff, which we work with NSSF and our friends in the space and let them tackle a lot of that and be a supportive entity. But when it comes to issues of access and you start taking away options and putting arbitrary age restrictions and things of that nature. So Massachusetts, with what ended up being House Bill 4885, and then was emergency signed as Chapter 135 by the Healy administration, almost completely shuts down non-resident hunting with firearms, especially from the northern New England states. Precludes any youngsters from going in there with firearms. The access is that bill in particular was so egregious. It started off as a 240-page just omnibus, anti-gunners dream. Realized they put almost all law enforcement as felons right away, so 100 pages come out of that, but what they were left with, they didn't understand and still don't understand the unintended consequences, especially for our space, recreational shooters. And it's so important for NWTF, for your fundraising abilities, mission delivery by way of Pittman Robinson dollars, and it's just anyway. The audience here knows, and we've covered this specific issue, but it's just a great example of what we collaboratively will get into, and then how, like Matt, you said, we're aligned philosophically on this stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And these states sometimes just don't recognize the consequences of making these rash decisions, and sometimes are making them in the dark of night in the shadows, right when the general public isn't aware and can't fight back.
Right.
And but they have consequences. It's going to be financial consequences, economic consequences. You're going to see hunting licenses decline. You're going to see wildlife management funding decline. You're going to see state taxes and revenue decline because of it too. The tourism dollars from non-resident hunters going into the state, that's going to decline as well.
Absolutely.
You're going to hurt not only your outfitters and the direct hunting industry, but you're also going to be impacting the hotels, the gas stations, restaurants, and all of those um, service industries that service those non-resident hunters.
That's exactly right. And it's, you would think people at that level would have some sort of a monicum of an idea, because they all want money. They want that tax revenue coming in. And yeah, I don't know if they're just ignorant to it, or they just are so laser focused and got the horse blinders on that they got to get this stuff passed.
Well, and as we, of course, the theme here at this conference that we're at is around what's happening to hunting, and it's all out a front and attack from all sides on hunting recreation and hunting as we've known it for really forever, beginning of time, and it's coming in so many different flavors, whether it's an anti-hunting proposition like what just was
Yeah.
killed in Colorado, the mountain lion Proposition 127, or it's something like Matt mentioned and you were talking about, where a bill that maybe was intended to curb a certain type of firearm has an unintended or maybe an intended consequence.
Yeah.
You really never know on youth hunting. That is recruiting new hunters into a sport that there are those that really vehemently oppose. And it's really death by a thousand cuts, and we all have to be on guard and watch from all angles, whether it's a wildlife commission passing a regulation because of commissioners that are being seated kind of inappropriately in a hunting seat. And we're going to talk about that here in about 45
That's
minutes
right.
on the big stage, or folks that are just trying to cut off the firearms, or the events like you mentioned, a National Wild Turkey Federation banquet. They don't want money being generated that way, and they don't care that licensed dollars through the American Model of Conservation Funding is so important to fund wildlife conservation. They don't want hunters doing that because they don't want to give any credit for that type of conservation through hunting. So it's a we just got to be constantly vigilant.
Yeah. You teed me up great with your examples there, and that's exactly where I was going. And I wanted to acknowledge the collaborative efforts and CSF and NWTF and NW really stepping up when it pertained to um, Vermont Senate Bill 258, where they were trying to do exactly what we said: seat
Yeah.
obstructionists and anti-hunters. That's right on that. We all started working together. Doug, Matt, we had good conversations. Got that action alert out. You'll see it in the presentation here later, but we had on that one alone, I think we had almost 1,000 engagements. And the way our action alerts go out, they're very specific. They go to the legislator. We don't spam a whole group of them, or it goes to that committee. So that's pretty impressive, those numbers. Likewise, in Kentucky, NWTF answered the call, and then obviously Prop 127 in Colorado, which I was very excited to see NWTF. Not that you said it, you guys are selective in what you will engage on, and it's got to be hunting heritage, access, turkey centric, right? Can't touch it all. But the whole community in NWTF did, you guys stepped up on that and fought that too, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that wasn't a Colorado issue. That was a national
yes, sir, that's exactly right.
part of that one. We definitely we didn't talk very long about it because we knew that it was not a Colorado state chapter thing. That was a national level policy issue that and really again an attack on our hunting heritage, which is half of our mission.
Yeah, exactly right. Um, all good stuff there, and the wins and the thwarting of what could have been just catastrophic legislation. With the remaining time we have left, I want to turn to the state of the NWTF. How's the organization? How are the co-CEOs doing? How's the how are all my friends and your friends doing? I'd like to get the update and see how folks are.
Yeah, well, NWTF's doing great.
Yeah.
COVID kind of put a hurting on us and a lot of nonprofit organizations, but we powered through it, made some changes business wise, faster than we normally would have. But it's really turned out for the better for NWTF. Our business model is really flourishing. The chapter system is flourishing. Our banquets have higher dollars. Maybe not as many people coming to them, but the money raised moves a lot higher than they used to be. So people are really passionate. They're eager to get out and enjoy some time with their friends and people with like mind, and also support good causes. So we've been very fortunate that across the country. Um, as far as the co-CEOs, Jason Burkhalter and Kurt Dyroff, they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
They're really well-fitted team. They both have different focuses, but when they come together to make decisions, they really stick behind those decisions. And they've really empowered the employees across the country to work on the hard problems through working groups and things like that that have really empowered our staff from all levels within the organization to be part of finding solutions to some of these problems or strategic issues that we want to take on. So organizationally, we're doing great.
He's fantastic.
Our mission, we are accomplishing our mission at record levels. Our convention last year broke all the records.
I couldn't
72,000 people.
I say this not in a bad way, but I really couldn't believe that. Coming off the 50th, I was like,
So
and then they just blew it out the water. I was like, holy smokes, it's great.
Yeah.
Kept riding that wave, continuing to ride that wave.
They just love coming to it.
Yeah.
That show floor is a draw. It draws people from
I was
thousands.
mobbed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you gotta. I'm not a very tall person, and I need to wear a snorkel just so I can breathe.
You and me both.
There is so many folks. I'll talk for a second about the state of our conservation delivery, which is a big piece of our mission. We, as Matt mentioned, through COVID, we had to reorganize. We lost staff during all of that. We've had to learn to do more with less, to be honest. And our conservation delivery took a big evolutionary shift from a project by project type of delivery, which, don't get me wrong, has historically been very successful. But we had to shift from that to the landscape scale, initiative-based conservation delivery that our directors of conservation operations talked about on the stage yesterday. And Fred, in prior to 2021, 22, the most number of acres that we have ever impacted in a calendar year was the top number was about 600,000 acres. In 2022 and 23, both years we eclipsed a million acres. I mean, it's phenomenal what's happened with that kind of evolution with fewer staff, but learning to be more of an influencer and a leader and not necessarily the direct on the ground implementer. So you're impacting greater landscapes with the conservation delivery directly related to our mission. So we're real proud about that. And we're on course to do the same thing again this year.
Fantastic.
So, somewhere that's gotta hit a ceiling because we haven't added any conservation staff, and then in addition to that, our new partnership with the Forest Service, the National Master Stewardship Agreement addressing the wildfire crisis in the Western United States. NWTF was the first conservation partner to step forward with the Forest Service and say, "Let us come alongside and help," and, we currently, just to speak a little bit about that, we have accomplished tens of thousands of acres of wildfire crisis strategy, high priority landscapes that we'd have never been involved in. A little bit of mom and apple pie. The wildfire crisis strategy acres don't always impact a turkey, but somewhere in the watershed it does. And that crisis is not a Forest Service crisis. We all own a piece of it as Americans. And the NWTF wanted to step into that and be a part of that. And so the Forest Service has entrusted us. We've got somewhere around $55 million committed.
Yeah.
Most of that has already been put on the ground of federal money to impact those acres in the western United States. And it's just been a phenomenal, and that was adding staff now that came from the bipartisan infrastructure law that, Congress funded. We put all that money out on the ground we've hired 6 staff to carry that whole pail of water, and it's been really something to watch.
What is the state of the wild turkey? I think turkey enthusiasts and even beyond that now, just general outdoorsmen and women are started to. When I say this, like we've known this, like there's been declines in certain parts of the country, but it's getting out there to more of the general population that maybe not passionate turkey hunters like the three of us. It's becoming more common knowledge. Where are we in recovery? Are we still, in the Gulf states and parts of the Midwest still working through this? Or are we seeing some rebounds?
Well, I'll address that a little bit, and then of course Matt's very embedded in the East. May have some thoughts about it. You know, for the 43 years that I've been in this business, there's a lot that we take credit for when we're in this business. There's a lot we take blame for, and sometimes, in spite of our best efforts, wildlife do good, and in spite of our best efforts, they don't do so. Who really knows what has caused those turkey declines? We've launched the greatest research investment effort that we NWTF has ever had in our history. Last year, around a $500,000 has been matched, 4 or 5 times that. The right research out on the ground to look at all that. There, of course, a number of states in the southeast, in the east, in the Midwest that really saw some significant turkey declines. And again, who knows what really caused that? And then we're starting to hear already within the last couple of years that populations have really started to rebound. People believe that. It's it's more anecdotal than science based, to be honest, but that results of that will show up in turkey harvest results, that sort of thing. But you still have to go on anecdotal information. It's what the public sees out there.
Yeah, they're eyes and ears on the ground for
Yeah.
sure.
And so I would say that where there were population declines in places that surprise people. There's some rebounding going on in places
Good.
that surprise people, and it's a whole menu of things that impact that. We know that avian influenza was out there. Of course, we know predators eat turkeys. We know that different environmental conditions, whether it's drought or flooding, has massive impacts. Long uh, clear into the nesting season, rainstorms or those events are really tough on hatching success. Hens coming out of a winter that has been really tough. They're not in the best physiological condition to bring off a full clutch. And so that's tough on birds. So we've launched some initiatives. One is Habitat for the Hat in the Southeast that directly impacts the highest quality nesting and brooding habitat in that part of the country. We've launched another initiative in the northeastern states called Forests and Flocks that directly addresses that coming out of winter condition of turkeys by doing the best we can with winter habitat. So hens come out in a very top physiological condition, so they're ready to lay eggs and keep as many of those young poults alive as they possibly can. There's a number of things like that going on. What impact that will have, we can only hope that it's a really good one. It's all research based. We're focusing on those main key factors, and it's kind of a wait and see because a lot of that research, the results, of course, haven't been
Sure.
determined yet. So that investment, the return on that is a sort of a wait and see sort of thing, but it's all headed in the right direction.
I think too, it's important. And again, I keep referencing us here at this, and we've heard this before, but for the audience who may not have, we went through arguably a peak in wild turkey restoration and population of birds on the ground throughout the entire country. And I still think personally we're in the golden age of wild turkey hunting and what's available out there. But we definitely went through a really awesome set of years where, bag limits were increased, access and opportunity was increased because the carrying capacity on the landscape allowed for that. And now I'm kind of on the backside of that peak and people, start ringing alarm bells. And maybe it's not as disastrous as you think. It's just the landscape balancing out and things working out. But there, you know, again, there's no doubt in some of those areas we just highlight, there is a decline. But it's great to hear the rebound. Now, did I read Dr. Chamberlain is heading that up down there in Georgia and part of that research?
Well, he has been appointed as the first endowed professor to GAL, and NWTF is the underwriter of that, along with the University of Georgia, of course, and other folks are underwriting that, but NWTF is leading that. That'd be more appropriate to say it that way. Yeah, Dr. Chamberlain has been the renowned wild turkey researcher for so long, but perfect fit.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, We're getting ready to wrap up here. Just leave a few minutes for parting thoughts from each of you. Man, I'll start with you.
Yeah, Fred, thank you. I tell you, it's the past couple of years have really been great for the National Wild Turkey Federation. A lot of our policy priorities have been passed. A lot have not. Still struggling to get Recovering America's Wildlife Act passed. The Farm Bill, as mentioned earlier, a fix on the cottonwood to stop that those lawsuits that halt conservation work on the ground on national forest lands, things like that. But we really have a bright future. You know, and just like the wild turkeys, even though you see declines in some areas and steep declines in some areas, you're seeing growth in other areas.
Sure.
And it all comes down to a couple of good hatches, right? You have a couple of good hatches, 2 years in a row, good hatches, and those populations really rebound strong. So we're hoping to see some of that kind of trickle into the
Yeah.
policy side too. A couple of good years of policy
We could use.
really makes a big difference,
Yeah.
right? Um, so we'll see what happens, but we feel like we have a good future ahead of us, and it's just been a privilege to be part of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna end on a conservation um, note, and that I'd like to leave you with a little bit. We have a lot of folks that ask about NWTF's involvement in active forest management because we are so involved in that, and we get the question every now and then, well, what do turkeys and trees have to do with each other? And so the thing I'll leave you with is, and we as turkey hunters, I'm gonna see you grinning. Well, we know immediately.
Yeah.
Depending on what number you fall on, whether there's 7 million turkeys in the continental United States or 6 million or 5, whatever that number is, every wild turkey, no matter what species they are or what part of the country or in what habitat type, every one of them last night spent the night in a tree.
Exactly right.
They weren't in a cactus bush. They weren't nesting on the ground. They weren't on a barn. Well, they could have been. Might be in someone's freezer if it's April or May, but every one of them spent the night in a tree. Arguably, the greatest structural habitat component that there are for wild turkeys are healthy forests that are in the right composition, in the right forest stand condition. We spend a lot of time on that, all of our staff across the country. So that's an interesting thought when you think that every turkey last night flew up into a tree, and just think about what that would look like if you could get that on camera versus what every elk did or every deer did or every pronghorn or every whitetail or whatever. Turkeys need a tree.
No doubt.
Can I make one shameless plug?
Please do. I was gonna let you, give all the contact stuff, but go for it.
Absolutely. So if you're a turkey hunter, even if you're not a turkey hunter, but you just enjoy the outdoors, make sure you go to nwtf.org and join the National Outdoors Federation. Find a local banquet in your area. Go and support us at that level, and we'd love to have you as a member.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has kind of been a recurring theme today in our NAS sessions, but the idea of uh, license holders saying, "Well, I'm a conservationist because I have a hunting license or I have a fishing license," is it's just not true anymore. And you got to have more skin in the game, and that's great. We love to have you. We love that you're buying those hunting licenses. We like that you're getting out there, and that all contributes to American system of conservation funding. However, if we're really going to be conservationists, we got to have more skin in the game. We got to be involved. So even if that's a passive membership of just spending your $35, getting your 6 beautiful turkey call magazines, you're contributing a little bit more and having more skin in the game. And like Matt said, now if you go and be an active member and go to the banquets and have a good time and create those relationships, so you do have a vested interest on what's happening on the ground and literally in your backyard. Um, you will be so much more enriched, and then that naturally leads to, I think, a natural curiosity in policy, and this is where we bang the drum. Get to know your legislators. Who is your legislator in your backyard? Because the policy that affects the NWTF membership, not so much what's happening on Capitol Hill, but it's happening in the state houses. And so many people do not even know who their local rep is, never mind their district senator. That's the key to a lot of this, and just simple phone calls and emails. We got a legislator sitting at the head of the table right now coming in next. He knows a couple angry phone calls and gets someone asking questions real quick. So, um, tie it all up and then tidy bow. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in. And Tom, looking forward to sharing the stage with you here a little bit later at the last day of our NAS Summit.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Fred.
Thank you. All right, it's my pleasure now to welcome into the NASC podcast studio EC President, Representative Jeff Goley of the state of New Hampshire, Representative Bill Reen of the state of New Mexico, our Vice President of the Executive Council, and both leaving us. We're sad to see you go. We've appreciated the leadership over the years, what you guys have done. Wanted the opportunity, and thank you for coming in to discuss your time on the executive council, your leadership, um, maybe talk to incoming freshman members that we would want to look at as joining our caucuses, why they should join the caucus, and why caucus members should consider running, throwing their name in the hat for the EC and being more of a taking the leadership role of the 2,000 plus members that we have out there. Mr. President, I'll kick it to you first.
I first of all, Fred, I want to thank you for doing what you do here and doing this podcast. I think it's important to the organization to get our voice out there to the folks and let them know what we do here at NASC as an organization, as well as what CSF is doing at a national level, protecting hunting, fishing, trapping, and shooting sports.
Mhm.
So with that, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
And I think the important thing is while things start in Washington, it's everything goes down to the state level, and it's important to have these caucuses. We all know now that we have all 50 states involved, um, almost 2,500 legislators across the country, part of a caucus, and continuing to grow. We host these annual meetings, annual summits every year, and 2 out of the last 3 years, we've broken attendance records.
Mhm.
This year, we're up over 325. We're continuing to grow, getting our message out, which has now allowed us to be on the offense in our state legislatures.
Mhm.
We used to have to be on the defense, legislation be filed, and to be, "Oh, what do we do? We gotta stop this and get it going forward." We have finally got to the point where we're bringing up legislation we want and getting it passed at a very successful rate.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I think this organization has allowed that to happen. And as you talk about, conservation and heritage and protecting all the um, R3s,
Mhm.
that this going forward is what this is about, and this is why we're here.
Absolutely. Representative Ream, your thoughts?
Fred, and I want to reiterate everything that Jeff said. I I I want to tell kind of a story when I first came, and I want to talk about some of the resources that we have at NASC. So the first year that I came here, there was a discussion. It was a breakout session, and it was done by the Arizona group. And they had just passed a law in Arizona dealing with off-road or four-wheelers. I thought, well, that's really interesting. The very next session that I went to, that law was in New Mexico,
Mm.
and it was on a fast track. And I mean, it went through quickly. Um, the point of this is that at that time, I realized the importance of these meetings. We're getting information that is happening in one state, it's coming to your state.
That's right.
And so, it helps you prepare for it. Let me give you another story. So I'm now on the executive council, and there is a move by some of our liberal legislators to have our game and fish manage endangered species in New Mexico.
Mm.
Well, and the persons that were pushing it are in the higher leadership of the Senate and the House, and we've got to get this under control real quick. So I got with NASC, and they went ahead and wrote the letter that I sent to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, where U.S. Fish and Wildlife said, if you make this move, you will lose all your Pittman Roberts money. And I was able to defeat it quickly
Mm.
with the resources that you can obtain
from NASC. And we need everyone to understand, if you have an issue that comes up, NASC has dealt with it. You need to call them. They are a resource. If they don't have the firsthand information, they know where to go get it. And it is us being together, which, as Jeff said, we now have basically 1/3 of all the legislators in the US are members of NASC.
It's amazing.
And, and we need to grow. We
Right, not
need to
done.
grow. So I'm not saying, hey, we're comfortable.
Hmm.
We need to continue on. We need to work with our uh, firearms dealers in the local jurisdictions and get them to help educate what legislators are supporting hunting and fishing, recreational shooting, trapping, um, and, elect those who are going to represent what really is the heritage in the U.S.
The information sharing at these summits, and to your point, heading things off as they typically move from a coast to a coast, right? And then it kind of moves inward. And we're seeing that with the attacks on boards and commissions right now as an emerging trend. Um, Having everyone in one place is so important. You can't put a price on it, right? So the information sharing it's just like, I'm being redundant. It's very important to have, and organizing it, having leadership out of all 50 states coming together. It's just it like you said, Representative Goley, it's able to move and advance positive legislation and not be on our heels all the time or head it off. Just like case in point, merchant category coding in New Hampshire, we beat that sucker back by proactively saying, you cannot do this in New Hampshire. You will not do this in New Hampshire. You will not invade the privacy of consumers in the state of New Hampshire or visiting consumers. And Governor Sportsman's caucus chair, Governor Snow, signed that one pretty quickly, whereas some other states went the other way and then are invading the privacy, right? So knowing that that's coming, more states, we're getting more positive movement on an issue like MCCs because of the information sharing, the conversations being had here.
And we know New Hampshire being the live free or die state, we're there to protect those rights, those individuals, make sure that that information is not shared. We're proud of it.
Yeah, we are. I wish all 50 states would be proud to do it, thwart this off. And fortunately, I think right now there's more states passing that good legislation to prevent that than there are those going the other way. But nevertheless, that's going to be something we're going to see in this coming session in other states for sure.
And I'll say it, it's through this organization and through NASC where I look back as when I was first coming to these annual summits, helped me get through legislation for suppressors for hunting, passing that legislation, um, getting out of state college students in state license fees. It's those ideas that you get and
Yeah.
you bring home when you come to these events. And that's why I think it's important that, as many folks and as many different states come because these ideas are shared and you can bring it back home and you can get those successful bills passed,
Right.
pass them successfully.
The organizational structure of NAS, the executive council, we've only had not even a full handful of presidents, you being one. There will be a new president elected here. What has that meant to you? I mean, I'm kind of being putting it into real numbers here. You're one of 4? I think 4. I think that 4 is the number. There was an original.
Might be five,
Okay.
5, maybe even 6. There was
I'm trying to remember back to the history, the lesson I got. It's a very small
small
number.
number.
And you're one of them. What has it meant to you? What has your tenure been like? And what's your advice to the next EC president?
It's an honor to carry on the tradition. I mean, my first summit I came to, I was fortunate enough that when I did my outdoor activity, one of the first times coming to an outdoor activity. I was sent out on a hunt with Mike Pitts, who was the president, John Astle, and Jerk Crane were in my group. And this is, I think, my second or third summit I had been to. And sitting there and listening to the stories that they told and listening to how this organization was formed, because it was all of them involved along with Senator Webb,
Mhm.
um, and hearing the history and how it just moved me as to this is what I'm dear to in my heart and hunting and fishing. Um, my wife will tell you I spend more time in the woods than I do at home, probably, or on the lake fishing, or one of those things. So it's a passion I have, and seeing what this group does to protect and preserve and help get legislation passed to continue the heritage going forward and protecting it is so important that it's just an honor to be able to serve as the president of this organization, and it's something I'll always cherish. And glad I could do it. I just have come to the point where I've been 24 years in the legislature, and it's a time and point where I had to make the difficult decision whether I wanted to run again.
Mhm.
And the one side of me said, I've had enough in the legislature. I've done my 24 years, done my time. And the other part was that tore me apart was it meant I'd be stepping down from this
Yeah.
position. So it was tearing me apart, but I will always cherish being in this seat. It was
That is a common theme through, many, if not all of our EC leadership. Um, Soon to be Senator Pat Brennan mentioned that yesterday when we were talking to him. He was nervous about his election in Vermont of, leaving the House and going for a Senate seat, and the biggest concern he had was not being able to be a member of NASC. How about you, sir? How your vice presidentship, how has that been? What will you look back fondly upon, and what's your advice to the next leadership coming in?
You know, it was really funny because the way I learned about NASC was the Safari Club contacted me. And they said, "We understand that you love to hunt and fish." And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, we want to send you to NASC." And that's how I actually started off. You know, I didn't know that we actually had a sportsman caucus at our legislature and it wasn't very active. So when I came over, I was instantly, into the group. I love to hunt and fish. Uh, if s- s- Away from last weekend, the 5 weekends prior to that, I was hunting with someone.
Mhm.
New Mexico is all a draw, on big game. So if you don't draw, you can't go hunting, but you can be the camp cook. So, and so I'm gone. My wife jokes that my hunting buddy and I have a bromance because, because, come September 1, we're just gone. Yeah. Whoever's got a permit, we'll go ahead and go with and do that. My goal was really to become the president. That was really my goal to become the president. But as I've said, there's two factors that came in. One is Ellen has lost her sense of humor at the legislature, and that's after 19 years. So the other half is, as I say, I just aged out. And so, I got to vice president. I've just really enjoyed all my time on NASC. NASC has been one of the reasons why I've stayed at the legislature this long. And, I encourage anyone, if you don't have the time, you have to understand this is not just a position with no strings attached.
Sure.
Okay. There is work that comes with this. There are meetings, there's Zoom meetings that we're going to have throughout the year. So you need to understand that, if you want to run for the executive council. But if nothing else, come and meet people that are like minded who are experiencing things that you're going to see in the future and share what you've experienced with them and how to go ahead and derail some of this stuff.
Mhm.
Um, we've tried, Jeff brought up about the college students. We've tried to do that in New Mexico, but in New Mexico, there's a law on the books that you cannot have a firearm on a college campus. And we cannot get the other legislators to move enough to go ahead and just eliminate that for hunting.
Mm.
You could have a shotgun or a rifle. We can't even get the movement for that. But we have to figure out how to get more people into shooting. One of the things that I saw at our legislature during COVID, there was a discussion that in New Mexico, we're basically a state of 2 million people.
Mm.
During COVID, the first year, there were 220,000 4473 forms processed. Of that, 61% of those people were first-time
Yeah.
purchasers. And the a committee report that came to us said, "Well, there's too many guns in New Mexico." And I said, "You need to understand," and I'm a retired police officer. What I'm hearing from my district and what this represents to me is people want to take steps to protect themselves. And that's what we're seeing now.
It's, well,
If I may just
yeah.
make one point too, when you come to this annual summit, one of the best things going here is you walk in the door and politics are set aside, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, um, it's not discussed here.
I
Your
can't
party's
look.
left here, and I think it's one of the few places you can go where you walk in the door and the reason you're here is for the passion of protecting hunting, fishing, trapping, and shooting sports, and that's what you're here for to concentrate on.
Outside of a handful of you, I couldn't tell you who's who in the zoo out there. I don't look. I mean, I know it's on our website, it breaks it down, but I for the it's like we always say, this is our issues. The affiliations don't matter because we're all here for the same passion, the same reason, the same concerns, the legacy, the heritage that we leave behind for our kids, our grandkids, our neighbors, because the work we do, the funding model, it affects everybody and it's to the benefit of everybody. And it's done on a very fused back. And to your point, Repareem, more people in the shooting sports, we need them. We'd like to have them come into the woods and beef our numbers up a bit more in the hunting space. But our funding model and our success of that is built on the back right now of recreational shooters and the ammo sales and the firearm sales. And they may not even hunt, but they're directly contributing. So when there are attacks on access for youth utilizing semi-automatics like we've seen in Massachusetts, and seen in New York, and there's attacks on just semi-automatics thinking they're getting rid of some ambiguous AR-15, pick your model, but it's affecting your turkey gun and your duck guns. These are problems. And you start taking that out of the system, now your birders, your paddle boarders, the non-consumptives, the buzzword, it's gonna affect them too. They just don't realize it.
We had legislation, when you want to talk about anti-gun legislation, we had anti-gun legislation introduced in New Mexico, and I'm on the House Judiciary Committee. And this was basically a law that would ban all firearms, all semi-automatic firearms. It was anything that was gas operated or used any portion of gas.
Is this the recent one, the last couple of years?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
And, I said, I'm not going to take up the committee's time to go ahead and go through all the different models, but let's just take Winchester and Remington.
Sure.
And I started listing the models, and I began with the Model 12. So we're talking about a gun that was made in the 20s that then Browning bought the patent, and that's the humpback Browning that you see nowadays. And I said, I just named off the models. I said, that's just two of the manufacturers.
Overwhelmed them.
Yeah. Now, there was another provision in this bill, and it said that the magazine of the shotgun cannot contain over 2 rounds. Well, that's a migratory bird regulation. And I said, all these shotguns were made with 4 and 5 rounds. But the point is, the people that are pushing these laws don't understand the impact.
All right.
And, when you can come here, we've got National Shooting Sports Association here. You can talk to leaders in all industries and find out information. They're a resource. They'll come and help you in your state, or you just have a phone number that you can call and find out more info.
Mhm.
But thankfully, it never made it for a floor vote, so that kind of went away. I anticipate that they will see some version of it in the future.
Mm.
Um, I overheard a conversation from a lobbyist from every town, and what they're looking at now is not the accessories that are on the gun. It has a flash uh, uh, guard, or it has a pistol grip. They're looking at how it functions.
Mhm.
Well, that's exactly the problem, because you go, okay, it's gas offline. Now you collect a whole bunch of firearms and make them.
Right. As we wrap up this session, gentlemen, I want to, just again acknowledge you for your leadership, your time, the dedication you've given of your personal lives and self to this organization. And I don't think it came very hard because you're just both so passionate about it. So it's an easy lift. I mean, outside of some of the logistical stuff and being leadership, I mean that comes with the territory. But when the work you do is a passion and you love it, the cliche, it's not very much work.
A- And just to say is, while I'm not running again for the legislature and while I'm finishing my term as president, um, I will continue to come to these annual summits just because of the group of people I've met, the friendships you get here, and it's just, like I say, near and dear to my heart,
Mm.
and I'm gonna continue to participate.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
And I want to reiterate, that's what I plan on doing. In fact, I talked to the staff and I said, I want to make sure that I'm still going to do an invitation.
Well, we definitely look forward to seeing you both next year in your, I guess, civilian attire, civilian life titles, and just enjoying it as you come.
Yeah.
So that'll be great. But again, nothing but praise and applause for what you've done for us and setting us up for the future. I mean, I'm a benefit of that. My team that we've been able to build out in the Mid Atlantic and Northeast, and the continuation of building our SPT throughout the country. It's it's a collective effort, but the leadership certainly helps and influencing your fellow legislators to give us those policy victories and the value that's put on CSF, NASC. It's the proof is there. I mean, we got the numbers, the stats. Just look at the growth in so many years, and that's because of folks like you. So thank you very much.
And I'm only 15 miles from the State House, so I'll still be actively involved in any legislative need afterwards.
Selfishly,
I'll still be there for you.
selfishly, I hate that this is happening, but thank you for still being around. I will return you both to your NAS summit for the rest of the day. Thank you again, and we'll see you later on this afternoon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
All right, folks, we are winding down the NASC 2024 podcast sessions. Um, right now, we'd like to welcome in our Director of Forestry Policy, John Colclasure, and dear friend, NWTF Director of Conservation in the East, Doug Whittle. Doug and I were friendly remarking about the frequency of title changes sometimes that go on in the biology, the conservation department in WTF. But nevertheless, I got it.
You nailed it.
Well, welcome in both of you. I wanted to take an opportunity to highlight forestry work. Introduce John again to the audience. His position is new. The success that we're seeing with our team and working with the legislators and the policy victories has allowed our team to continue to grow. John moving into directorship for forestry policy portfolio. Um, and give him an opportunity to talk about what he's doing, but at the same time, highlight some good work at NWTF that Doug is championing and I believe is the marketing guru behind the Forest and Flocks initiative in the East that was referenced by Tom Speasy earlier in our sessions with Matt Lindler. So, um, John, I'm going to start with you. Talk about some of the high level policy work that CSF is involved with, and then let's pull it into the work we're doing collaboratively with NWTF and some of our other partners.
Sure. Thanks, Fred. Well, one thing is we've been working on the farm bill. If that is going to happen this year or next year with an extension, and farm bill is uh, the delivery vehicle for the largest private lands conservation uh, funding and suite of programs in the country. And NWTF has been a long time player in that space. The CSF is really new, particularly on the forestry side. So we are just trying to be supportive of NWTFs and uh, Forest and the Farm Bill Coalition and some other initiatives that we're involved with, trying to establish a federal easement program for conservation easements for working forests, specifically forest conservation easement program, FSEP as we call it, and also now with administration change, fingers crossed that the mature and old growth rulemaking will go away, which would have potentially had devastating impacts on the ability to manage forest on U.S. Forest Service land.
Mhm. Your work, Doug, right now with this new initiative, talk about it. Where did it come from? And so much of the forestry work we hear about tends to occur in the West. That gets a lot of the highlight in the media limelight. Talk about what we got going on here in the East, the part of the country.
Yeah. So I think as we've built some other initiatives, when you think about waterways for wildlife in the plain states, and then Habitat for the Hatch evolved from that process. We built and unveiled Habitat for the Hatch in the summer of 2023. Just kind of a natural movement where we had a lot of chapter volunteer interest and partner interest in, hey, what are we going to do in the Northeast? And so we put a multi-department team together, just like we did for Habitat for the Hatch and Waterways for Wildlife, and just started hammering out, hey, what are the priorities here? What do we need to accomplish for both aspects of our mission? And we approached it that way, just thinking about the Northeast and when you look at the hunting. You just look at the reports that the Fish and Wildlife Service puts out every 5 years, right? And the Northeast is always just sticking out as far as the least support for hunting. The fewest percentage of the hunters that we have are from New England,
Mhm.
and so there's all these reasons to really focus in on the Northeast and the hunting heritage aspect of our mission, and what can we do to improve that and to reverse that trend if at all possible. Um, but from the conservation perspective, we looked at, hey, we have had turkey declines in the Northeast. What, why? Like, what can we do about it? And, it's, at the end of the day, there's habitat ties to that. And you think about the landscape changes over time in the Northeast, and, there's no lack of mature forests out there, right? I mean, I like to say that our forests need a shave.
That's a great way of
Yeah.
putting it.
And, there's, we've done a lot of work, as John mentioned, through the Farm Bill and allowing our staff and partners to work with private landowners to put young forest cover on the ground through different programs that the Farm Bill offers private landowners, and so whether it's through our National Forestry Initiative with NRCS or our direct agreements with NRCS in New York and some other grants that we've received and working with Wildlife Management Institute and other partners over the years, we've always just put a premium on putting as much young forest on the ground as possible, whether it's on private lands through farm bill programs and other partnerships, or on public lands through stewardship agreements with Forest Service and other state agency partnerships and partnerships with other NGOs like Rough Grouse Society and some others. Um,
we're willing partners with anyone that wants to play ball in that space. So, it was kind of, um, born out of just, hey, let's focus our efforts here for the next 10 years on what's the most important thing. And of course, tied to all that is, and we talked about it yesterday during our lunch presentation. Um, it takes money. It takes the policy work to allow us and our partners to continue to do that work, right? And make sure that our agency partners and private landowners still have that legal authority to do the type of work that's important for not just wild turkeys, but for a lot of species.
Sure.
And make sure that they're places that uh, hunters want to go to.
John and I have talked about this in the past on the program about a need for education and a good communication strategy, trying to convince, not convince, but relay to the public, maybe a little convincing, that when they look at a stand, an old growth stand, and we look at that, and like there's not much value there other than aesthetics, right? It's pretty to look at, but otherwise, it's worthless. And you try to tell the general public that, and then they're just, the Lorax in them comes out, and they're like, "What? How could you ever say this? Save the trees." And it's like, "No. We need those edges. We need those staggered age growths, right, to support, like you just said, not just the game species, non-game species, threatened species, and to an extension, songbirds, butterflies, little invertebrates, like everything down the line depends on the biodiversity, the natural spaces, right? So that's a big part of telling that story, I think, and getting over so much of the controversy that comes with it. Saying that, what policy is needed to execute what you're trying to do in your region of the country for NWTF?
Oh, that's a good question. And you say it singularly, like there's one.
Well, so I mean, let me put some more to it. How does CSF play into this as far as a partnership and supportive role to work with state legislators in the region that you're trying to work to advance any policy or policies that will help make this successful for everybody?
Yeah. Well, number one, I mean, and I'm glad you asked it in that way because and we at NWTF, I mean, we've greatly appreciated our partnership with CSF. I mean, the policy work that we've done, I can't think of many, if any, big ticket policy items that we've dove into without first, reaching out to you or John or one of the other regional staff at CSF to say, hey, what are you hearing about this? What do you know? And kind of going through those questions and answers in the dialogue to help us understand what the background is on some of these things and whether it's something that we need to be concerned about. Does it have legs? Is it going to have a chance? And what are the pros and cons of this thing? And it really has helped us decide, yeah, we need to engage here and be on this side of it. So that has been immensely helpful, because our district biologists, our staff, I mean, we come into this as biologists and the policy work, it's critically important, but rarely are we, just ready-made staff that are just made for going into the Capitol. And so we have to evolve in that way. And you all have just helped us tremendously. And so, hearing about John and your position and being in that forestry space, thinking about how much that can help us, you know, basically be more efficient in that role.
So follow that, and let's go down that road. Like, if you can, riddle out some of the specifics of what a conversation between you and John would go through.
Yeah.
I'm learning as we go as well. This is really it's for the greater conservation community. You think about the people we know. This is kind of stuff we don't hear about
Yeah.
all that.
Oh, if he's putting us on the spot. Hopefully it matches with what you think, right? But so and feel free to step in, John. I just to me, I think about some of the things that are going on in Massachusetts, in particular with forest management and have gone on, and where there were basically there was a hiatus and basically timber management work was in question.
Mhm.
And so forest management work was kind of halted for a little while, and y- you know having having the ability to lean on CSF staff to learn a little bit more about what's going on because we may not always have the right contacts with the folks that have initiated these things in the state capitals. So to understand what the background information is, do we need to kind of back off and let processes play out? Just asking some of those types of questions, like when to engage, because some of these things can pop up, and our volunteers are really energetic,
Sure.
and in a lot of ways, and they, we just want to jump right into everything, but sometimes we don't have to jump right in. Like, do we kind of sit back and let this play out a little bit more? Let some amendments happen, let some things play out before we weigh in. So that, I think that has been a huge help, and more specifically is the when to engage on an issue. So
Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we bring to the table is our experience in state houses, relationships with legislators, and then we can look to you as the subject matter expert, say, what are what do you as a biologist and what does your team think about this legislation? And then layer that on top of engaging your membership base if needed, as they are spread throughout the state, and then their legislators are calling them from, hey, I live in your district. This matters to me. I don't
Yeah.
have you support.
Doug, for your initiative, is there, I guess, a lack of a better way to put this, is there one state that needs this focus more in the region that you're focusing on? I know you just mentioned Massachusetts and they had a break in forest management, but is there one that's just, man, just doesn't get it and needs some help?
I don't think so. I mean, unless something changes, I think we're always going to have to tackle these one-offs as they come up. You
Yeah.
know, and what I'd like to do, with this initiative being fairly new, is um, try to navigate how to be more proactive, how to see these things coming before they become a bigger issue than they need to be, and get in front of legislators and their staff, and those folks that are considering sponsoring legislation that could be negatively impactful on forest management, and how do we prevent some of these things from happening. How do we, and not just prevent the negative, but how do we be more proactive to um, maybe codify what we are allowed to do, what we want to be able to.
So what would that look like? Like, a management schedule, so many years going through and setting a standard? Like, is that possible? Is that something that can be done?
It's a
Or
good.
does that even make sense? I mean, I'm just asking the guy off the street about this stuff.
I mean, you probably want to ideally to maintain management flexibility.
Okay, so it
Things
can't be so rigid, right?
things are going to change.
Right.
Hurricane's going to come. That's right.
Sure, sure, sure. Okay, that makes sense.
That's right. But things. I mean, what you're talking about, Doug, is hopefully they just same stuff we deal with on wildlife policy. Yes, you hope that the legislators you have a relationship with them, and then they're gonna before they drop a bill, that may not be the best idea. That they would hopefully touch base with their you know people like us or NWTF or state wildlife agency or some forestry state forestry uh, associations and their state forester to say run it by them to get their thoughts before they introduce them.
With this project, where are you, I guess, what land, what forest are you able to work on? Like, I comes to mind in New Hampshire, White Mountain National Forest, biggest tract of contiguous acres of wilderness that is in our state. Are you allowed to work with the national system, or are you guys just working with the state owned?
So yeah, we're going to be working on private lands, state agency lands, national forest lands, and Green Mountain National Forest in Vermont,
Hmm.
White Mountain National Forest in both New Hampshire and Maine. We have partnership agreements with on both forests. Obviously, we're a major partner with U.S. Forest Service. We get a lot of work done. I mean, nationally, we're always in the well, I shouldn't say always. We're typically in the top 5 to top 10 in terms of timber buyers of U.S. Forest Service national forest timber, and that's largely through our stewardship agreement work.
Hmm.
But we have, like I said, we have agreements with the Forest Service to complete work on the green and on the white, and we're going to continue to do that. And typically, that involves putting young forest on the ground, maintaining the wildlife openings. Those are big tracts of heavily wooded forest where we have young forest and wildlife openings. They're critical to maintain for that diversity, maintaining the stand diversity, maintaining the wildlife diversity that utilizes those edges, the openings. Um, those are critical to maintain. The longer you let them go without management, the more expensive it gets to get them back to wildlife opening status. You go from using a brush mower to a hydroax to a brontosaurus. All of a sudden, you go from $100 an acre to $1,000 an acre to $3,000, $4,000 an acre to get that stuff reverted back to wildlife opening. You got to stay on top of it. It's a lot more expensive than lighting a drip torch and setting a prescribed burn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I see a lot of articles out of Vermont specifically that every time the Forest Service proposes a new habitat project, there's negative press about it. Seems to be pretty common there and then pretty common in some other parts of the country.
It is, and we do spend a lot of time, reviewing and trying to weigh in and support, those types of proposed actions, in the green and the white.
I know we're kind of shooting from the hip here, but as I step into this role and have more time to focus on forestry issues, that's one thing I want to be doing is working with you all and weighing in on those projects, being involved in forest planning to the extent that we can. And then, leverage our Sportsmen's caucuses and bring them to the table and hopefully build some support for them, for those habitat projects, give the Forest Service some air cover, and hopefully enable, support the Forest Service actually following through with their forest plans and creating habitat for the diversity of wildlife.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that would be immensely helpful. And I think that's another way that, we can collaborate, not just on legislation, right, but just through forest planning processes. When we know that there's a particular project out there that Forest Service or another agency partner needs our support for. Absolutely. Certainly collaborate.
When you're talking to your membership, and my experience has been normally it's the regional director that's getting most of the face time with your membership and has the most communication with them. How are you telling the story to them right now? How are you exciting them? Because they're a great group, they're a passionate group, and when you can light that fire, it's easy to say like, "Oh, we're gonna do a trap and transfer here," and then like they sign me up, I'm ready, or let's do an extra fundraiser to make sure we can fund this. When it comes to this kind of work, how is Carter Heath in New England firing up his great volunteers?
Well, yeah, that's a great question because they do. I mean, they see the membership at the fundraising events, and we only get to so many of those, and so you kind of going back to how we built this. It was a team of staff across departments, and that included Phil Farrar being on. He's the director of field operations in the East, and um, so having someone at Phil's level in that department, be a part of the team, help build it, help shape it. Um, listen to Phil talk about it, and it's pretty infectious, as you can imagine.
Phil's a great communicator. He's a fantastic individual, but I think he could excite people about a wet paper bag if you just gave him the mode, so this is what I need you to do, go sell it. Right. You know?
Yeah.
He's great about it, except the problem is we don't have 10 Phil Ferrars to go across the country and do that, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think the communications across our departments has gotten better and much better and has increased immensely because those folks are asking like, hey, what are we doing? Like, what's the next thing we're going to do for the initiative? Do you have the videos? They're asking for all these resources and our communications, our video team is amazing. And yeah, as you know, and so we have the videos that are shown at quite a few of the events, and so we're just hoping that the membership, just sees it. If they see that video, if any of our staff talk about it for 5 minutes, we just hope that hook is there. I mean, if you can't talk about it as a staff member and get the members excited about it, you got to check your pulse. Yeah.
Yeah, what's neat about this initiative being where it is in the country is those members get so fired up when they have something tangible close to them, right? I can remember in my early days of being a regional director up there. Um, the, the complaint, the knock always was, I'm sending all my money to Edgefield and I don't see anything for it, right? Which is it's exaggerated, but nonetheless, it was there. That was perception becomes reality. But once they were able to, like, I can remember not Doug, Matt going up to Vermont and doing, small track crab apple releases. But they were able to go out there and do that work and see that work, and they would get fired up. And it's like, here we go. This makes sense. I'm getting from A to B, and here's the result. This is why I go to my once a year banquet, and how the funding mechanism works for the state, and then the split for you guys. That money stays in that state, and they actually get to go see it, and they get to go work it, and then play on it and utilize it. So this here, I mean, for me, outside looking in, it really kind of wipes out that mind space they get into. Like, no, you got this whole region with a huge lift going on
Right.
that you can be a part of.
Right. And it includes the hunting heritage component. And I think, Carter and the other staff, Jesse Warner now on the hunting heritage side, for education and outreach, they do a fantastic job of working with our volunteers and, putting on events like the Field to Fork events and introductory events to hunting and just different ways to bring in new audiences and new places. And so, whether it's a habitat work day like you just referenced, or a Field to Fork event, there's something for everybody.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can get across state lines, you can get through New England in a pretty short
Pretty
period of
quick.
time.
Yeah, yeah.
There's not there's typically something going on within a pretty short drive.
And to NWTS credit, I mean, I look at some of the other nonprofit critter groups out there, and NWTS got in spades, man. Like, just the involvement, the volume, just you're really just out there pounding the ground, and the volunteers do the same thing. So it's pretty good.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I do want to tip my hat to a lot of those other groups
Oh, of
who
course,
are with
of
them
course, yeah, no, absolutely.
constantly, and without them, it's hard. Like we have our NWTF team and then that team of partners,
Yeah,
which
absolutely. Well said. Okay, I'm not slighting anybody, Doug.
I understand.
I know what
Right.
goes in, and I know the hours that you guys put into this. So it's I want to recognize that. But anyway, I digress. Often I say about telling our story as sportsmen and women, as conservationists, trying to make hunting acceptable, trapping acceptable, things like that. But I think what we've missed, and we're lucky now to have John in the role that he's in. This is a really important part of that makeup of who we are, is telling this forestry story, and management and land management. We've missed it for so long. There's been a very small sect of people that get it, people that are professionals in it, but the larger audience has never really grasped hold of it. And making it part of that sort of elevator pitch why hunting and the community, the sporting community, is good for conservation, how they are conservationists, and why this matters to the 80% that don't. Is a critical component of that story now. Always has been, but now recognizing it and perpetuating it.
Right. Right. And I don't know if this is where you were going with that comment, but one of the things that I think about in regards to that is, think about where we've all hunted, right? Like how few tracts of forest land have we gone into
Exactly where I'm going.
and had a great experience where it wasn't managed. And um, there's a place for the wilderness acres, right? There is, and there's a lot to be said for having those backcountry experiences in wilderness areas, and you can be successful and you can have those experiences, and there's a place for that. Um, but where we currently have that ability to manage forest lands, it's so critical to be able to maintain.
My last question for you, and I'll let you guys close it up. How is urban sprawl and just the non-managed trees, I guess the best way, concrete moving into forest, affecting the work you're able to do? Because now it's just these contiguous acres are shrinking.
Mhm.
The state forester spoke to that this morning, saying, his tracks are subdivided through generations. Is right, smaller and smaller. If you want to manage your 10 acres, you're not going to get a logger to come out there just 10 acres. You have to work with it's too expensive. So we're going to work with your neighbors and the cooperative to have everybody have their, the stands, cut or harvested.
And I sometimes wonder, is a lot of the concerns about watching a timber stand get managed by those that aren't as close to it as we are. Is it that fear that every time a tract is managed actively, that it's going to turn into a slab of concrete? Is that the concern? Because we know differently, right? But do they know?
There's good PR there. Every time, at least down by where I live, and on 10 out of 10, it does turn into a a cul-de-sac neighborhood, you see huh?
See, in the paper, a lot of times they'll mischaracterize a wildlife habitat improvement project on public lands as deforestation.
Yeah,
This is not the case at no time ever. But when you're converting a forest stand to a subdivision, that's deforestation.
that's yeah,
Like,
Exactly.
right.
so, and the other thing when with sub or suburban urban sprawl is it also with the fragmentation it makes it a lot more difficult to use prescribed fire
100%.
because now you have the smoke that's going to be impacting those that neighborhood or that house, and those folks may not understand prescribed fire. They don't really care about the kids and so wildland urban interface.
That's what's so challenging. That's what's so challenging about the Northeast is that we're just so damn crowded,
Right.
right? Like when you talk about dripping fire, I immediately go to, longleaf pine forest down south and how they're able to do that year after year and maintain that and keep that understory down and make it really just super nice for them ground nesting birds and then all the other critters that are utilizing that. But you don't hear about it, you don't really see it, and it's really hard to do up there.
Yeah.
Culturally, right?
Culturally, it's not a thing. You start saying fire, people think you're insane. You're gonna burn everything down, like, they do it. I mean, New Hampshire Fish and Game, I know they go out there and they do some prescribed burns, but maybe it's by strategy that doesn't get the press because maybe just people are just gonna freak out, but culturally, you're exactly right. It's not a thing.
Well, sorry, jumping back to your thing about trying to cut timber near sprawl. The other thing that it's good to keep in mind is that when you're able to cut trees on your property and you know get a check from that, that land is generating value for you and your family. And if you're not able to manage your land to do that, then they're not going to have. It might be incentivized to then to sell that tract for development. So keeping those lands viable and working is going to keep them in a forested natural state, which benefits wildlife and what we want to do. But
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
100%. Yeah. And, you know, can't have a discussion about forest management and all that without just, recognizing the importance of the private foresters too that provide the management plans for these landowners. I mean, there's a lot of responsible management that's going on. And tip of the hat to those foresters that are helping these landowners, whether they're NWTF foresters, private consulting foresters, whoever they work for, if they're helping the private landowners. Um, there's a lot of work that is being done the right way. And, they're responsible for that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Like to hear it. Closing thoughts?
I just appreciate the opportunity. I mean, this event, this is the second year in a row I've been here, and one of the most valuable, few days that I spend on the road away from home. I truly enjoy it, and I just thank you guys for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming in. John?
yeah, thank y'all for being such a strong and longtime supporter of uh, CSF and NASC and everything we do. It's always great to be able to pick up the phone. A certain issue is in y'all's wheelhouse, and pick up the phone, call your staff, and right away they're on top of it. So great partnership.
Fantastic. Well, Lindler already plugged the organization. People know where to go and where to find you and how to get to banquets. So maybe we'll put a bow on it. Oh, I didn't ask him. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. When's the next symposium?
That is coming up in
Next year?
St. Louis in 25.
Yeah. Cool.
There's I can Google that website up for the symposium.
Are people going to be allowed? Because I know in the past it's not been really open to except for inside folks. But I thought there was a maybe allowance and general public to come. People with interest, turkey enthusiasts.
Check it out.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Wild Turkey Symposium, if you can go, if you're a turkey nut, is just man, it's church and it's beyond. It is good stuff. So if you want to get fired up about forestry, forest management, you want to get fired up about habitat management, all that, make your way to St. Louis next year. That's gonna be pretty awesome. Maybe I can find a way to get there.
Get there, man. All the latest and greatest.
Indeed.
I have one final thing.
Please.
I think with our increased partnership with forestry space, I think it would be makes sense to get together in April, maybe
Indeed.
get out in the field and do some forestry field tour.
Yeah. Might have to look at some of those
April to May. I agree. That's a solid idea.
we manage forest lands to figure out where the birds are hanging out.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time, your contributions. I appreciate it and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
All right, this is this is it. This is our final NASC session as we round out our recording opportunities here in Baton Rouge. It's been a great couple days here, and let's end it with some energy. We're talking ballot box biology. This is no secret to everybody who tunes into the show. If you've been under a rock, maybe that's your excuse. But if you've been an active sportsman in the space, you've seen one of our guests all over social media. Even if you don't know you've seen them, you've seen him. Colin Schmidt joins us from New York. Brent Miller, our vice president of policy, joins us. Dan Gates, the man of the hour, the face of the movement, as we talk about Colorado Prop 127, joins us now. All of you gentlemen, thank you so much for rounding out our coverage of NASC.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us on. Thank you very much.
So I have the privilege of pretty much just sitting back and letting you three gentlemen go with this. We have covered it. Dan's been on the program quite a few times over the last year as it concerned Prop 127 in Colorado. As everyone by now knows, that was defeated soundly. It was a great victory, and a lot of in-state partners and national partners as well came to bear and rallied to that cause with your organization, Dan, and then the Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus in Colorado. So we're going to start there, but then I want to bring the full circle with the idea of ballot box biology, how it's become an emerging trend in the 24 states. Brent, is it 24, 26?
26
Thank
as an
you.
initiative or referendum.
So not all the states can do this, but there are 26 that can, and they're circumventing the legislative process, and we'll get to that. But Dan, welcome, and take us through again for the audience, 127, the process, and where we are post-election.
Well, I got to say thanks to everybody and the generosity that everybody's given, and your guys' willingness to continue to help us move the message and move the needle on educating the general sportsman and woman, but also legislators and commissioners and organizations and just the general public. I mean, people don't realize what it takes to run a ballot initiative. And while I've been around this for quite some time, actually having the boots on the ground work to have to engage in has been remarkable to see what it takes in today's day and age with the ammunition and the armament that the enemy has, but then what the sportsman and women community has to be able to build up too. So, post-election has been, everybody said, "Oh, I guess you're going to get a chance to go hunting, and then you're taking a break." No, it's actually gotten busier because everybody was saluting and high-fiving and giving praise.
So everyone knows who you are now.
Yeah, and they're like, "Hey, the bearded idiot over there is the one that we need to talk to."
Better watch out. They're going to put your name on the ballot. So
But for probably with a target on it. So, but it's been pretty remarkable to see the coming of ages, I think, of what a lot of sportsmen and women around the country. And the NASC summit here is a great example of, Barry and Brent and I spoke about me coming. I had not planned on coming,
Mm.
but we knew that we had such an interest and a curiosity and a following from around the country and around North America, and to even some degree around the world, where we got donations from outfitters and professional hunters and all and South Africa that had hunted Colorado, that have clients in Colorado, and seeing, and I said this in one of our presentations here today, that 72% of all of our online contributions came from non-residents. And that's a remarkable trend in itself, to say these people from around the country that had either supported Colorado in applying for licenses, had hunted Colorado, were trying to hunt Colorado, used to hunt Colorado, they showed buy-in. And it's not degrading what the residents of Colorado did. It's just that there's more non-residents that hunt and fish somewhere that had interest in Colorado. And to see what the agencies and see what the entities and the organizations, a lot of the partners are here at the NASC summit, and I, I think it was a light at the end of the tunnel to some degree, that organizations, even though they supported, they weren't really sure we could win.
Mm.
They weren't really sure that we had a chance in hell to be able to turn around and pull it off, and we didn't know that we could,
Yeah.
because if you looked at the polls and the way they came out, pretty soon it's like I think this is like trying to climb Mount Everest. And the polls were wrong, but the polls were wrong by 30, 40, 50%. And for us to come out 55 to 45%, beating them back by about 325, 330,000 votes in the state, winning 58 of 64 counties in the state, turning counties that voted pro-wolf in 2020 and turning them and flipping them to come our direction. And then even the counties like Boulder and Denver County that we still lost, we gained 10 or 20 percentage points over what the wolf deal did, because there wasn't a message in 2020 about science-based wildlife management, and we continued to pound that message home over and over and over, and letting people know that the experts for science-based wildlife management in Colorado was Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and we all benefit off of that, whether we paid into it or not. So we're holding our head up high, but we're mesmerized by the amount of enthusiasm and optimism that this one victory has created nationwide for people to say, what are you going to do next? Or what can we do next? Or maybe there's hope in New Hampshire or in Minnesota or in Oregon. And what's your playbook and what's your roadmap? And you guys are helping to lay that out. And Colin and I talked a little bit about that, and Brett and I before. And I can't say enough thanks from our side to help out in this whole process. And CSF was a major contributing factor to help us navigate and facilitate the conduit and the mechanisms of fundraising. It doesn't go unnoticed, but as I said many, many times, unless I have a list,
Right.
12,777 donors and contributors, I'm going to leave somebody out. So we just appreciate everybody's help and support.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
It really is a testament to be when you're proactive, everybody works together, what we can achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. It's remarkable to think in today's day and age that we have to do what we're doing in these sort of battles, but to be able to pull it off so formidably, collectively, and as a unified coalition, um, it's just kind of cool. It's still kind of surreal, but we're humble at the same time.
Colin, if you would give us your background, and then I want you to respond to Dan as well, because I know you had a comment there.
No, and again, thank you for having me on. Longtime listener to the podcast, first time guest. Excited by that. I served in the New York State Assembly for 4 years and was able to be co-chair of the state's legislative sportsman caucus during that time. Been to a good amount of the NASC summits during that time. So happy to be here this year. I'm now out of state government and serve in an appointed local government role and as a sergeant in the Army National Guard. I've also been working on academic research in environmental, wildlife law, and policy. So I've gone back as an adult in an evening program for a law degree and a master's of environmental management, and wanted to focus a lot of my studies and research on issues that I worked on in the state legislature and worked on with colleagues around the country. So I've been in frequent contact with Brent and others, obviously from the Congressional Sportsmen Foundation and just the contacts that I made here at NASC. And the one big issue that has always come up wasn't as prominent in New York, but across the country, obviously the Western United States, is ballot box biology. And we've seen the antis are well funded, they are well resourced, and they don't give up. And this, what Dan is able to accomplish, is amazing and shows you have to be on the job 24/7, because you slip up once, wait once, they can succeed. But I think when Dan goes into how much money, how much time, how much effort was put in, I wanted to research what are ways that we can do to be, instead of being on the defensive, which is great to win on the defense, but how can we go on the offense? And what can states do, and what legal remedies do they have to try to constrain the overuse and abuse of the initiative process when it comes to scientific wildlife management? And my research focuses on imposing supermajority restrictions on initiatives that deal with scientific wildlife management or any wildlife management issue. The state of Utah in 1998 passed Proposition 5, which imposed a supermajority restriction on wildlife related initiatives. Since that time, no wildlife related initiative has qualified for the ballot, let alone be voted on. It withstood federal court scrutiny And there's some good case law that my law note, which will be published in January, lays out for other states if they would like to advance supermajority restrictions on these wildlife related questions. And I think it's something that needs to be done. There are other methods that you could look at. Uh, this doesn't discount those, but this is what my research has shown, in my opinion, to be the best option. Not discounting other options, but the best option, and particularly the best option to survive court challenges going forward. And one point that we highlighted in the presentation earlier, what I think is important, is we have a fantastic system here in North America, in the United States and Canada, the North American model of wildlife conservation, and it's science based. And really, hunters and outdoorsmen and women are the ones who created this system and have funded this system and have ensured its continuing success, the most successful science based or really any conservation model in the entire world. And initiatives, these public voter initiatives, really subvert that science-based model, and you take decisions away from scientists and experts, and you put it to a public vote on issues many people are not properly educated on. They're not capable to make that decision. And people argue, oh, well, a decision could be undone. But when it comes to wildlife management, a wrong decision today could cause irreparable harm for generations to come. And that's an important message we're trying to deliver.
You think about a decision like that being made, and right now you have the ability at most of the state level to their boards or commissions or however they're set up, but those authoritative teams to adjust to the numbers of science on the ground. You start codifying this stuff, it just takes forever to un. I'm trying to think of a nice way to do this to fix a problem. I had another word go through my head very late in the game here, but um, nevertheless, that is the preferred method. Brent, I want to kick it to you from the CSF standpoint. I know you got so much experience on this. How are we as an organization? How are we working with our partners to do exactly what Colin is saying and be proactive on this?
Yeah, well, first of all, Colin, just want to thank you for all of your leadership over the years. I mean, it was really a joy to work with you in your role in the New York Assembly and as co-chair of the Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus there. And for the 4 years that you were in service there, we held the ground. And
We did. We had some good successes. There was those COVID years.
yeah,
And I was just thinking back, having this conversation with somebody, you want to forget the COVID years. But I remember Brent called up, and the governor at the time had this ridiculous restriction. You couldn't launch a boat from a boat launch. You remember that? During COVID, you couldn't even go out to a boat launch. The restrictions were so onerous. I mean, these are the things that it didn't get front page attention, but that really talk about what's essential. People's mental health and the ability to be outside, to me, that's essential. And it was Brent calling up, and we were able to open that back up at the peak time. I mean, I truly believe that saved people's lives because they were cool. If you can't even go out on a boat in a boat launch, I mean, that's the type of work that Brent, CSF, and all of the state members do. That's just one little thing, but to me, thinking back to that, that's huge.
yeah, absolutely. And we had some other major wins too. I mean, we lowered the hunting age for big game with a firearm in New York. And this is something that we've been working on for 12 years, 15 years before that. We're finally able to get it done with your leadership there in the state, which is something at the time, New York had the highest hunting age in the country. You had to be 14 years old before you could go and shoot here with a firearm in the state. And now we got that lowered down.
And I think you're seeing, I'm sure we might need another year or two of data, but the anecdotals that I'm seeing is you're seeing more younger folks participate. And I've seen just from the Facebook groups, New York State Hunter groups and stuff, even more younger girls who are participating. And as a new girl dad, I like to see that. But she's several years away from the new lowest threshold as a new baby. But it's nice to see that you're getting more age diversity and more women and young ladies who are getting involved. And coupled with that was during the same time, the increase in the legal hunting times, the 30 minutes before full sunrise and after full sunset. that twilight period.
Yeah.
That was a court addition.
That's right. Yep. Yep. So anyway, back to the ballot box biology. I'm sorry for subverting that discussion there. But I did want to give some accolades here to your service, and your service continues because your legal work here is bringing some real ideas forward that we as an organization can take and act on, and that's exactly what we've been doing here at the NASC Summit. We brought in Colin to present his research to all the other state legislators who are here. That if they have to deal with an initiative or referendum process in their state, they now have a constitutionally defensible roadmap to go about making the bar a little bit higher that the antis have to get over. And, just reflecting back on, the work that had to be done with your leadership in Colorado, and thank you again for all of that. I know you've been on a hell of a victory lap here. Oh, but yeah, just thinking back, if we had the supermajority restrictions in Colorado, what would that have done to us in that fight? They would have had to have raised more money. We would have had to have raised less. They have to get over a higher bar. We have to meet a lower bar. Um, so something like this could have a real and measurable impact. Now, it's not a guarantee.
Right.
Somebody could bring something to the ballot that could have the necessary threshold to get over that 60% or 66% or whatever the state enacts. But it raises the bar, makes it more challenging, and is a safeguard, a step in the right direction in terms of protecting our issues at the ballot box.
Yeah, and just to throw in, I mean, just from a Colorado perspective, and we talk about the 26 states that have some sort of initiative process, and Colorado's threshold is 55% for a constitutional amendment. What we would like to do is figure out a way to require the signature gathering process to be 2% of the signatures from each one of the 35 Senate districts. But then our maximum threshold would be 55% because that's the constitutional side. If we could raise the statutory side to that. Now, the kicker is, look at what we won by, 55.45%. We would have done it fine if we were doing it on their end, but they would have had to do 55.1%.
Right.
As close as what Colorado has been over the course of the last 15 or 20 years. But if you look at national politics, I think Trump was at 50.3 or something versus Kamala Harris at 47 or 48 something. But if you look at those numbers, we're so closely divided on so many different issues. It's hard to find something that is 70-30 or 60-40. Now, we did have a couple in Colorado that were like that. One being the slaughterhouse ban that you and I talked about, Colin, Ordinance 309. That was the ban of the slaughterhouse in Denver for lamb slaughter. But that's a city and county of Denver ordinance. And then the fur ban was a city and county of Denver ordinance. The reason I mention those is because those are the type of settings that the antis try to capitalize on if they're not confident that they can do anything on a state level. Because what they said is we want to change and alter the way people live, what they eat, and how they live their daily lives. And if they could have gotten those done, we were worried that if they did that in city and county of Denver, that same voter audience would have likely went that direction and helped pass Proposition 127 just because of the population density and the urban sprawl. They failed handily, 69-31, and the fur ban was 57-43. And the voters in the city and county of Denver helped kind of set the rest of the tone and narrative for the rest of the state to say, oh, we don't want you messing with our food. We don't want you messing with our fiber, with cowboy hats and fishing lures and Native American crafts. And we don't want you messing with our wildlife management.
And I think that's, important context because I think a lot of people may be looking at it from the outside, wouldn't see that. But I think it's also actually makes me, while I'm happy for how it came out,
Yeah.
it also makes me more concerned because it just shows how organized, even though they weren't able to reach, their 50 plus one, that they are thinking, as you have mentioned, many plays forward.
Yeah.
And if we have to keep playing catch up and being on the defensive at some point, if not Colorado, somewhere else, it's going to go, terribly wrong from our perspective. And you look obviously at the Wolf prop, right? Barely won,
right?
But it did. If Colorado, which has a 55% supermajority for constitutional amendments, matches it for statutory, the Wolf prop wouldn't have been able to pass with a bare majority from, the more urbanized areas where people are far removed from where wolves have been, reintroduced. You look at Arizona, and that's one of the pieces that we review in the law note that will be published. Arizona previously has defeated 2 attempts to restrict initiatives on wildlife management issues, which is probably shocking to some people. But the supermajority they voted down for wildlife management. Several years later, they approved the supermajority for tax increases in the state. So, Arizona is a good example, and Colorado. Voters obviously do have a tolerance and an appetite for saying, you know what? If it goes to a popular vote, there should be a little bit of a higher threshold, and there is legal and constitutional historical support for these things. So even if we look at the states that already have it in place for certain other areas, there's no reason we shouldn't also have for wildlife management. I think it's important, as you mentioned, previous campaigns that didn't talk about the science and talk about that there. This isn't just some made up something. This is experts. Our state tax dollars in Colorado, in Arizona, in New York, in California, wherever, every state, our tax dollars are supporting a state government system. And then obviously, uh, hunters and consumptive users are help supporting either the DEC or the Fish and Wildlife or whatever state agency is. These are experts who are working for the state, and then we want to circumvent what they're saying. It really goes against logic. And if we could put some type of protection in place, it will make a big difference long term and maybe temper the abuse of the initiative process. And I think we talked about the history as well of initiatives when it first came about. They came about in a lot of states when they first passed it. They'll be used minimally. This will just be for extraordinary circumstances. And as your own data shows, and the public available data shows, it's anything but. It's now common recourse, sometimes multiple initiatives in a year in certain places.
For an example, and we had 14 ballot initiatives in Colorado this year, 7 statutory and seven constitutional.
There you go.
We did 10% of the entire country and in 1 year. And now that they use this as some portal, like, hey, what do you want to do on Friday? You want to go bowling? Let's file an initiative. And they've capitalized on the shirts. It is, and it's so easy to be able to do that. But I want to go back to the illusion, not your illusion, but the illusion of people to say how unimportant that the wolf vote was in 2020. If we would have had those statutory requirements in place to raise the bar, the threshold, and we would have won because they didn't meet the 55%, even though it wasn't a constitutional amendment, just because it was statutory. We wouldn't have had 2 city ballot initiatives. We wouldn't have had the excise tax ballot initiative, and we would not have had Proposition 127 because that would have failed. It would have saved tens of millions of dollars in headache and hassle 4 years later if we'd have just thought proactively and preemptively 4 years ago about what we need to do to stop this. Dump all our money and effort into the wolf deal. Didn't happen. We lost by, it was 50.9% to 49.1. We wouldn't have been doing any of these. We'd have been actually putting money toward conservation and toward wildlife management as opposed to ballot box biology.
So
And
with a strategy being identified, and we could talk about this for hours, but we do have a presentation coming up, so I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, plus mine, since I'm MC. Um, with a strategy in place, how do we replicate this? And then another question I had as I'm listening to you gentlemen speak about this costs a lot of money to pull off, right? This time around. How do we get our coffers to a space that when this comes up, collectively the community is contributing? Is there creative ways that our nonprofit partners and their membership based organizations can take, I don't know, 50 cents, a buck from every membership and put that into a kitty so that there is a national pot that we can all support each other? I'm just spitballing ideas at the late hour here, but I'm curious, but we have something tangible in in your work. How do we go forward with this?
So, my quick close on that is my suggestion is to be proactive on the offensive and where applicable, do a supermajority, pre-fund those efforts because we can control it. You know what's going to happen. Pre-fund those efforts, and that would probably throttle down the other attempts and probably be the most cost-effective in the way forward. And I'll defer to Dan and Brent on maybe the defensive responses.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go into a slightly different direction, but the idea of getting off our heels, getting more proactive and educating people before before something like this hits to the ballot box, I think is something that I'm really interested in, that we're interested in at CSF as an organization. And we're going to be really pushing the Wildlife Council organization. So, and Dan, I know you're a chair, so maybe you could take it.
Yeah, I mean, and my example I would give is Colorado has had the Colorado Wildlife Council since 1998, and now there's 2 of those in the country. As I mentioned to the membership here the other day, why don't we have 22? Why don't we have 42? And I think that advertise, product companies advertise to potential customers. When we're talking about what we're doing here, it's not advertising toward potential customers. It's advertising for a potential customer base that would help support science-based wildlife management because they benefit off of it as well. I'm not knocking any one of the user groups that we've got here that are supportive of everything we did and contributed to this. But if they spent any money toward talking to the general public when it's not necessary, they could actually make so much headway that the opposition would look at a lot of these efforts and go, wait a minute, did you see this advertising campaign? I mean, what they do? Spend $23 million or $14 million or $7 million to convince people that the experts are the ones that should be managing Colorado's wildlife or New Mexico's wildlife or Ohio's wildlife? If we did that collectively and tell people, get outside, but trust the experts that are managing our wildlife as opposed to waiting to be kicked in the butt and go, ha, oh, well, now we got to turn around and try to defend this. We got to defeat that. Well, we wouldn't have to do near as much of that. I mean, you remember the Smokey Bear ad? Only you can prevent forest fires.
That's fantastic.
I mean, it's exactly
Like verbatim, like spot on impression. That was
I
great.
agree. I agree with all. Absolutely.
and if you convince people of that, it becomes second nature. And if you start talking about user groups, then the user groups start talking to their kids, and their kids talk to their friends, and the friends talk to their teachers, and pretty soon you have more interaction in the schools. That's just natural, organic, holistic growth. And those are longer conversations, but that would be my first thing is turn around and figure out an education campaign that benefits all science-based wildlife management and supports the North American model without getting into the tenets and start talking and preaching to people about what they should do and how they should do it. Let them see what they do. Last word, 97% of all Coloradans engage in some sort of outdoor recreation. 97%. But only 7% only engage in consumptive use. They have as much buy-in to natural resources as what hunters and anglers do, but hunters and anglers pay the dividends so they can all enjoy Colorado's outdoor resources. That's pretty much straight across the board nationwide. Yes, it is.
Brent, final remarks?
Well, I'm excited about the future. Really excited about the wins that we came off of in Colorado. Also had a good proactive win in Florida with the constitutional right to hunt and fish. So I think there's a lot of different ways that we can go about getting proactive on this, whether it's looking at right to hunt and fish in additional states, whether it's looking at additional wildlife councils, looking at the supermajority restriction that we're talking about here today. But CSF is primed and ready to go, and we're going to be working with the caucuses on this as we go forward.
Absolutely. Colin?
Again, thank you for having me on, and thank you for Brent and everybody here for the continued leadership. The future certainly is bright, and I guess a final plug outside of all of this policy that we're talking about is, you have a friend or family member who may have that interest to hunt or fish. What solves a lot of this? Bring them out. A lot of people are nervous,
Yeah.
but once they do it once, it could change their minds and change their perspective on all of these policy, political issues, and give them a new appreciation for the outdoors. So lend a hand, teach a kid or a neighbor, whoever it is, and that has a huge impact as well.
Sure. Remove that super easy barrier to get out of the way. Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Again, I'll recognize that we could do a Rogan-esque session on this for many hours, but we simply don't have the time. So thank you for your contributions, leadership, and all of that. Enjoy the rest of the summit. And I know we'll all be in touch again very soon on the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That's the show. That's the coverage. Man, there's a lot there to unpack. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Um, truly, I don't know where to begin. Just so many great guests, so much good stuff to talk about. Um, I guess I'll just go in order here with acknowledgments. Thank you to FTA, NTA, and the trappers. They gave a great presentation along with Delta Waterfowl one of the days on mesopredation and kind of the state of trapping and communication. And just, it was a fantastic event, talk. So thank you to those folks. Secretary Sheehan, Mark, thank you guys. Great conversation. I know kind of went a little down the bear track there, but I mean, it's exciting. It's new. Um, and I have an affinity. I mean, bear hunting for me is knocking on the doorstep of turkey hunting personally. So it's just really cool to see and hear about that becoming a thing in Louisiana. And without without overdoing it here, overselling it, I just got to tell you, Secretary Sheehan is just an incredibly impressive individual. Her resume, all she's accomplished in a very short amount of time. Um, Great for the state of Louisiana. I do expect we see, um, I don't want to say bigger and better, but kind of fits. I do see us seeing more from her in the future and adding to her resume, probably at a more national stage. Um, Thank you to my friends at NWTF, Matt Lindler, Tom Speasy. Appreciate the update. Always appreciate talking turkey, as well as Doug Little for coming on and talking forestry and what's going on and the Northeast and collabing there with John Cole Glazier and more about forestry and certainly our coverage of it and our ability to engage and working with our partners. Um, to our outgoing EC president and vice president, thank you for your words, your remarks, your thoughts, years of service and leadership. And then finally, on ballot box biology, again, just a great conversation. Uh, Sounds like the ability to go on the offense with this kind of thing in 26 states is at hand, and certainly here at CSF, uh, working with people like Colin, partners like Dan Gates, and people that have gone through this and really beat back. Same thing in Maine with Commissioner Camuso on the bear referendums, a couple of them back to back. So we will work diligently on it, and it's just great to get hear from them, the people that are in the trenches with us on these things. So a lot of work to be done, but it's a positive outlook, I think. So again, thanks so much. Near 6+ hours of conversations here over these 2 days. Certainly would have packed in more, but we've already got a full agenda at NASC, and can't take everyone's time and um, can't record for 10 hours a day. Would if I could. So take your time with this stuff, digest it, share it around, and come to NASC next December. Again, I said it yesterday on the part one. Planning is already happening for Memphis with a joint venture of the Mississippi State and Tennessee State Legislative Sportsmen's Caucuses co-hosting that event. It's going to be awesome. The things we're already kicking around, the ideas. Uh, it's going to be a lot of fun. Set the bar pretty high this year in Louisiana. Broke all sorts of records um, internally, and then and attendees and the amount of information that was given. It's fantastic. The event continues to build upon itself year after year, and everyone that chipped in on this, the host committee, Representative Z, Louisiana State Legislative Sportsman's Caucus, Mark Lance and his contacts there locally, and Mark worked his backside off with his contacts. So a huge tip of the cap to Mark for getting that going. Our development team, our events team, Ashley Nixon. I mean, it's a collaborative effort, man. But there are just some people that just keep the ship right and steer it in the right direction and put on one hell of a show for our attendees. The feedback's been so positive. It continues to come in. So, um, yeah, I keep repeating myself. It's a quality event. If you've been seeing the same thing in it, year after year at your other legislative summits, change it up in 2025. Come hang out with us. Talk to your fellow members in your state house. Ask them about the Sportsman's Caucus. Ask them about NASC and what they think, and join us. Join us. Join us. Join us. All right, that's it for this week. No feature next week. More than enough stuff here to chew on. We will have a couple more news roundups for you, one more feature podcast for 2024, and then that's it. We're going to shut down for a little bit. We will see you in the new year, guys. We got a great the planning for 2025. I mean, we are deep into it. I think we're already into the summer, um, with content, subject matter, guests. So, if you enjoyed the rollout in 23, if you enjoyed all of 2024, stand by. Like NASC, we look to improve and build upon that. And we thank you guys, the audience, for hanging with us, for making this thing a success, tuning in, and sharing it about. Enjoy your weekend. If you still got seasons going on, get after it. I know the South, some other states are muzzleloader seasons, late muzzleloader seasons are coming in for deer. So enjoy that. And we will see you next Wednesday. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.